In a post-apocalyptic world, animals began to grow more aggressive and brutal, and soon after, humans started exhibiting the same behaviors. They turned into complete zombies, losing their senses, feeling no fear or pain, driven only by the urge to eat fresh meat and blood. And amidst all this chaos, the protagonist ended up losing all his relatives. However, for some reason beyond understanding, he managed to go back in time, giving him one more chance to start over. With that said, let's get into the video. Chapter 1. The first thing the man did upon returning to the day before the apocalypse was slaughter all the cows on his family's farm. Those cows were the Zhao family's main source of income. The neighbors who saw it were shocked, whispering that he had gone insane. His ex-girlfriend was nearby, mocking him, saying that even if he managed to sell all those cows, she still wouldn't marry him. Besides, she already found herself a rich boyfriend to take over. Before she could finish, Zhu snapped, "Get lost. Don't waste my time. I've got cows to kill." That's when Zhao's parents showed up. Panicking, his father shouted, "What the hell is going on? If something's wrong, talk to us. How are we supposed to live if you slaughter all our cattle?" The moment Zhao heard his father's voice, he froze. The machete slipped from his hand and hit the ground. He ran and hugged them tightly. His voice trembled. "It's so good to see you again. This time, I swear I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." His parents looked at him, completely confused by his strange behavior. But Zhao didn't stop. He said, "There's no time to explain. You just need to trust me. We have to kill all the cattle now and sell the meat. Every minute counts." His father looked into his son's eyes, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I trust you." After all, their son was the only one in the village with a college degree. If he was being this serious, it must be because he knew something they didn't. His mother let out a deep sigh, rolled up her sleeves, and silently joined the slaughter. The onlookers stared in disbelief. The whole family's gone mad, haven't they? Zhao checked the time. Only a few hours remained before everything fell apart. He turned to the crowd and shouted, "I need 3 guys to help me slaughter the cattle. $800 for each one." The idle men nearby lit up immediately, pushing and shouting to claim the cash quickly. Zhao called a local butcher and sold all the meat at half price, under one condition: cash only and fast. His parents watched in silence, heartbroken, as the cows they had raised for years were turned into meat and money in just a few hours. But Zhao didn't stop to explain. He stuffed the money into his pocket and said, "I have to go to the city." Before leaving, he looked back and said firmly, "Stay inside. No matter what you hear, don't open the gate. Wait for me." Then he jumped into the pickup truck and sped down the dirt road. Zhao then said there were 2 hours left before the apocalypse began. First, the animals would turn wild and attack anything in sight. And after that, humans would start showing the same symptom. Also, anyone who got injured or bitten by a zombie would end up turning into one too. After a month, half the world would be infected, and within a year, only a few million survivors would remain. In his past life, he had lost his family to that sudden disaster. But even if he didn't know the reason for his reincarnation, he wasn't going to let it happen again. So he bought everything he could find for self-defense. Then he stopped by the pharmacy and cleared out all the emergency supplies from the shelves. But one thing was still missing. More than anything, Zhao needed gunpowder. He knew that at the start of the apocalypse, those with firepower would have control. He took the rest of the money and went to a pharmacy that on the surface sold fireworks, but behind closed doors dealt with illegal gunpowder. The catch: the owner was none other than Lin Ji, the guy who stole his girlfriend. Zhao walked in and threw the money bag on the counter. Lin Ji raised an eyebrow and laughed. "Well, look who's back. Still hung up on that girl?" Zhao didn't even blink. "I'm here for business. How much gunpowder do you have left? I want all of it." Lin Ji's smile faded, his tone shifted. "We're a legit business now. We don't deal in anything illegal." Zhao smirked slightly. "You sure about that? Because last year, a woman in a blue coat showed up near the mountain out back. Want me to dig her up and ask what's really going on here?" Lin Ji's face turned pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. After a long silence, he turned to the woman beside him. It was Lin Ji who said, "Take him to the warehouse." After Zhu left, Lin Ji leaned back, letting out a cold laugh. "So someone really knows about our little secret." His eyes narrowed with malice. "In that case, I don't think he'll last long." Zhao returned home with the supplies and quickly called his older brother to help unload. But he brought bad news. Their younger sister, who studied in the city, still hadn't returned. Zhao froze. In the previous life, she would have already been home by now. Could his early actions have triggered a butterfly effect? There were only 30 minutes left before the outbreak began. Without another word, he jumped back into the truck and sped off toward the city. "Don't leave the house," he shouted as he drove off. "No matter what you hear, don't open the door until I get back." The tires screeched as he floored it, racing toward the school. He knew most of the infections on day 1 began with animals, but schools were full of people, and once the virus hit, chaos would break out. Suddenly, the truck jolted violently, as if it had run over something. Zhao slammed the brakes and jumped out to check. A mutant dog lay on the ground, writhing in pain. blood-red eyes, fangs dripping thick black slime. The outbreak had already begun. Meanwhile, the news that Zhao had slaughtered the cattle had already gone viral. At Qinshan Elementary School, his younger sister Zhu Ying was immediately nicknamed the school freak. In the classroom, Xiao Ya saw Zhou Ying staying quiet and got bolder with every word. Waving her phone, she mocked, "Your whole family's insane. Your college brother killed all the cows just to marry a hillbilly. Pathetic." Zhou Ying snapped, slammed her desk, and sent Xiao Ya's phone flying out of her hand. Just then, the teacher walked in, saw the mess, and silently confiscated the phone. After class, while Zhu Ying was cleaning the room, Xiao Ya ambushed her, shoved her to the floor, and pulled out a box cutter. "You broke my phone, freak. Now you're gonna pay." But before she could do anything, her body started convulsing violently. A jet of black blood burst from her mouth, and she collapsed on the floor, choking and vomiting uncontrollably. Zhou Ying screamed and ran down the hallway in a panic. The entire school had already descended into chaos. Cries of pain, pleas for help, and sounds of pure horror echoed through every corridor. Zhou Ying barely had time to process what was happening. A zombified classmate, with bulging eyes and a torn mouth, lunged at her. She fell to the floor, paralyzed with fear. The zombie missed its strike and slammed face first into the ground with a sickening thud. At that moment, Xiao Ya staggered out of the classroom, now completely transformed. Her body was twisted unnaturally, with a grotesque smile stretched across her face. She screamed and charged straight at Zhu Ying. But just before impact, Zhu arrived in time and delivered a flying kick that sent Xiao Ya flying down the hallway, crashing through a window. The other zombie got back up, and Zhu didn't hesitate. He drew his short blade in one swift motion. The zombie's head hit the ground before its body did. Zhou turned and saw his little sister, Zhu Ying, trembling and crying. Trying to lighten the mood, he teased, "Oh, sweetheart, I could hear you screaming from the next city over." At another point, they were in a car and saw a zombie devouring a woman. But without much thought, the protagonist immediately ran the zombie over. Zhou Ying forced a shaky smile and said, "That was intense. Are we sure we're not in a horror movie?" "Damn." Zhou looked at her and saw right through the facade. He spoke calmly. "It's okay to cry, you know. The world's changed and we'll have to learn to live with it. Mom, Dad, and our big brother are home and safe." Zhou Ying managed a faint smile, but back at the village, under the illusion of peace, danger was already forming. When they arrived and confirmed everyone was okay, Zhou nodded. "I need to find someone," he said quietly. His mother began to protest, but Zhu Ying stepped in. "Let him go," she said with a calm and steady voice. The girl who had just run for her life now saw everything with clarity. Her brother was no longer the same man he used to be. Zhao felt something awakening inside him, a strange, pulsing power rising from the chaos within. It was raw, untamed, but full of potential. His thoughts turned to a figure from a past life, a lone warrior who moved through zombie hordes like a phantom. If he could find this man in this life, he'd be a valuable ally. Meanwhile, in the village committee building, Xiao Xie was leaning against the door with all her strength. She still believed the villagers were just panicking, not understanding the seriousness of the threat. A large bluish-gray hand suddenly smashed through the wooden door. Seconds later, blood-covered zombies stormed in, growling and clawing. The village officials were paralyzed with fear, completely overwhelmed. When all seemed lost, the window shattered, and Zhu jumped in, his blade gleaming in a blur of motion. The zombies fell one by one. He rushed to Xiao Xia, gently held her face, and checked for any signs of infection. Only when he saw no blood or bite marks did he breathe a sigh of relief. This was the woman who, in his past life, had been cold, authoritarian, and almost untouchable, but now she looked fragile, almost human. At that moment, the man with glasses shouted, "Why did you kill them? They were our neighbors, people we lived with for years." Zhou took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "They're not human anymore. One bite or even a drop of infected blood, that's all it takes. They're zombies now." The man adjusted his glasses, his voice buzzing. "Zombies? That was old Zong. He was only looking for his missing granddaughter. We should call the police. Let the authorities handle this." At that moment, Lin Jin came out of the back room, clapping slowly with a smug smile. "Wow, the hero's here, huh? What's next? Gonna say the government's behind it all?" He mocked. "Zombies? Come on, you've watched too many movies." The mocking tone fueled the panic into rage. Some began shouting that Zhu should be tied up and handed to the police. Just as chaos was about to erupt, Xiao Xie stepped forward and yelled, "Enough. Zhu just saved our lives. Believe what you want." But those villagers were no longer acting like humans. Zhou looked at Xiao Xia with gratitude, then spoke firmly. "If you still don't believe me, I can show you the truth. Let's go to the forest behind the mountain." Lin Ji, eyes narrowing, had already noticed Zhao's strange behavior in the city, stocking up on weapons and supplies. Now he was almost sure this guy knew something. "If Zhao has anything that could expose me," thought Lin Ji coldly, "then he has to die, no matter the cost." With a fake smile, he gathered some thugs and said he'd come along, just to be safe. Zhou Xie and the man with glasses, Huang, also volunteered. She was worried about the villagers, and Huang still hadn't heard anything about his missing wife. The village chief had gone out earlier that day to investigate the disappearances and hadn't returned. When the group arrived at the back mountain, they soon found the chief's abandoned vehicle parked near the forest. Zhou touched the hood. It's still warm. He didn't leave long ago, he murmured, eyes narrowing. Fragments of memory from his past life began to fall into place. If everything happened the same way, this forest could be ground zero of the first zombie outbreak. But even after searching the whole mountain, the group found nothing. Until Zhou noticed a cave entrance hidden among the rocks. The ground was stained with blood, and the air reeked of rot. Everything indicated zombies had passed through there. I'm going in to check, said Zhou emotionlessly. Lin Ji immediately mocked him, throwing provocations. Or maybe you just want to go in there to destroy the evidence. What? Gonna hide your little crime scene in there, Zhou? He looked at him coldly. If you're scared, stay here. Otherwise, follow me and shut up. Just as Zhou was about to enter the cave, a figure emerged from the shadows. Wang shouted with joy. It was his missing wife. He rushed forward with open arms, but in the very next second, Sin bared her teeth and lunged straight at his throat. Don't touch her. Zhou moved in a blink, plunging the blade between her jaws without hesitation. He drove the blade deep and killed her, then turned to look at Huang. The man let out a broken scream and swung at him with a wooden bat. You killed her. You murdered my wife. But Zhou quickly knocked him to the ground and stayed calm. His voice was low and heady. I know you're in pain, but Sin was already gone. I'm trying to keep the rest of us alive. Huang staggered back to his feet. His voice cracked with pain and rage. Easy for you to say. What if I killed your family right in front of you? Could you stay calm then? The words hit Zhou like a slap. His mind flashed back to his past life, to the bodies of loved ones lying cold and bloody. He held his breath, then with a growl grabbed Huang and lifted him into the air as if he weighed nothing. His eyes sharpened like blades. In this life, no one threatens my family and gets away with it. He raised his blade, but before he could strike, Lin Ji's voice cut in from the side with a mocking laugh. Well, look at you. Maybe you're not so different from the monsters after all. In that instant, a strong hand struck Zhao's wrist, stopping the blow and throwing him to the ground. A familiar voice growled, "Wake up, idiot." Standing over him, with a serious and firmer face, was his older brother Zhou Ming. Zhou Ming stared at Huang, who was still lost in the grief of losing his wife. Suddenly, he shouted, "Man, did you see what she turned into? Nobody wanted this. If you need someone to blame, blame me. Her death is my fault too. But now you need to pull yourself together. You're the village leader. Damn it. These people still need you." Huang trembled, clenched his fists, and finally gave a slow, broken nod. The tension finally broke, just as a weak cry echoed from the cave. Help, someone help me. It was the voice of the village chief. But Zhu froze, frowning. Something was off. The tone was too controlled, too human. One of Lin Ji's thugs rolled his eyes and mocked. What a bunch of cowards. I'll drag him out myself. That said, he entered the cave. He didn't get far. A wet slicing sound tore through the silence. His torso was cleanly severed at the waist. Blood sprayed everywhere. A grotesque zombie dragged the upper half of his body and tossed it aside like trash. Behind it, hundreds of glowing red eyes lit up in the darkness. A horde had awakened. What Zhu saw was beyond anything he had imagined. The number of undead pouring from the cave was absurd. Even if he managed to fight his way out, how could he protect Zhu Ying and his brother at the same time? Luckily, the Zhou brothers had trained since childhood with a military martial arts master. Their skills were elite, comparable to professional fighters. Aim for the head, they're sensitive to direct light, Zhou warned. The brothers moved in perfect sync, slashing and dodging, clearing the area around them in minutes. Meanwhile, Lin Ji had already hidden behind a tree, too scared to even breathe. From deep within the cave, that same strange cry for help echoed again. Zhou and Zhou Ming exchanged looks. You two go back, Zhou said firmly. From here on, it's too dangerous. You'll only get in the way. And after a brief discussion about what they should do, they left. Zhou thought to himself that he couldn't let anyone else die, and hoped they could deal with the source of the horde that would erupt in a few days. Thus declaring that he would leave the rest to them, the two stepped into the darkness. It didn't take long before Zhou was suddenly interrupted. There was a body ahead, dry like a husk, and the heart completely missing. That same voice called again, whispering unnaturally through the air. Zhou Ming raised the flashlight and swept the cave with its beam. Sitting with his back to them was the village chief, still and silent. Then he turned with a jolt, pale face, empty eyes, and from his chest, tentacles began to uncoil. The creature lunged at terrifying speed. Zhao reacted instinctively, striking its head with his blade. The moment the blade hit, he knew something was wrong. It barely moved. This wasn't a regular zombie. It was a mutant. In the next instant, the tentacles whipped and hurled Zhu against the cave wall. The beam of Zhou Ming's flashlight lit up the creature's face, and it recoiled violently from the light. They seized the moment and ran out of the cave. Gasping for air, Zhou Ming turned to his brother, stunned. What the hell was that? Zhao exhaled slowly. I think we're dealing with cross-species infection. Some kind of genetic recombination between humans and animals. This isn't just another undead. It evolved. He nodded toward the dark mine opening. My guess is there's a nest of mutant bats in there. And that thing was a second stage variant, probably the former village chief. Zhou looked up at the full moon. Good thing it's bright tonight. These things fear the light. They don't come out easily. Zhao Ming stared in disbelief. Since when are you a virologist, Joe? He shrugged, half smiling. Maybe I watched too many documentaries before the world ended. They were about to head back, planning to return the next day with the proper gear to deal with the mutant, when suddenly a swarm of glowing red eyes burst from the cave. It was a horde of mutant bats. The sky darkened in an instant, the moonlight swallowed by wings. Taking advantage of the chaos, the mutant zombie launched itself like a missile, striking Zhao Ming with a brutal blow and hurling him far away. One of the tentacles whipped out, destroying Zhu's lantern. The creature's intent was clear. It had chosen Zhao Ming as its target. Zhou gritted his teeth and pulled with all his strength, but it was useless. The monster's power was overwhelming, far beyond what any human could resist. As the creature's jaws were about to close around Zhao Ming's hand, Zhu froze in horror, helpless. Then, out of nowhere, a car came speeding in. The door swung open with force, and at the wheel was Xiao Exia. Without hesitation, she aimed and rammed the mutant zombie, throwing it far. Zhao didn't miss the chance. He charged forward and landed the final blow, putting an end to the creature's life. What they realized after, it was the village chief. Xiao Exia was visibly shaken. Zhao Ming exhaled deeply, his voice tired but sincere. If you hadn't shown up when you did, we'd both be dead meat. But before they could catch their breath, Zhao's face turned pale. He had seen a clear bite mark on Zhao Ming's forearm. Zhao Ming gave a faint, weary smile. Sorry, little bro. Now you're gonna have to take care of the family. As for what comes next, I don't need to say it, do I? Those words cut through Zhu like a blade, because deep down, he already knew he would have to be the one to end his brother's suffering. Facing his infected brother, Zhu was consumed by guilt. He had believed being reborn gave him a chance to change fate, to protect his family. So why was the story repeating itself? Suddenly, his eyes locked onto the mutant's corpse. He ran over and pulled the blade from the creature's skull. Then he began cutting the head again and again, without stopping, blood splashing everywhere. Zhao Ming, thinking his brother had gone mad from grief, shouted, "What are you doing? Stop that." Xiao Xia also screamed, trying to pull him back. But Zhou didn't stop because something had just occurred to him. He remembered that high-level zombies absorb life energy from the weaker ones and condense it into a crystallized core, hidden deep in the skull. Moments later, he found it, a dark blood-colored crystal lodged in the back of the creature's brain. He turned to Zhao Ming, his voice firm, eyes full of hope. "You haven't turned yet. We still have time." And with that, he held out the crystal. Zhou spoke with a heavy voice. "This is a zombie core, formed from concentrated viral matter. It comes from the same source as what's inside your body. If you take this, there's a chance you could evolve into an immune and enhanced type. But there's also a chance you'll turn into one of those monsters." Zhao Ming barely glanced at it before swallowing it whole without hesitation. Zhao hesitated, but deep down, he knew it was their only chance. After swallowing, Zhao Ming smiled seriously. "You had that the whole time. Could have spared me the drama, huh? So when does it kick in?" Zhou answered bluntly. "In 2 days." Zhao Ming nodded, looking toward the cave. 2 days. Got it. If I don't come out by then, seal the entrance, alright? But if I come out with superpowers, better not get jealous. Watching his brother walk away so naturally, Zhou finally felt the weight in his chest lift just a bit. He believed in him. With a faint smile, he said, "I'll be waiting for you." Lin Ji had overheard the whole conversation. A sinister smile spread across his face. "So that's how it is. All right then, let me speed things up." The next morning at sunrise, Zhou Ying entered Zhao's room wearing a makeshift battle armor. "Bro, time to get up." Zhou turned his head and looked at her with a defeated expression. "What are you wearing? Looks like something out of a cheap sci-fi cosplay." Zhou Ying puffed out her chest proudly. "You said we needed to strengthen our defenses. I spent the whole night making this armor. Cool, right?" She waited for a compliment, but Zhou just stretched out a finger and poked the armor, sending Zhu Ying rolling out of the room like a barrel. Zhou stared blankly. "This is your armor? What are you gonna do when the zombies come? Roll over them to death?" Shaking his head, he stepped outside, only to see his father balancing on a ladder, stacking bricks to reinforce the yard wall. "Mr. Zhou," he called out. Zhao was finally awake. He jumped down from the wall, grabbed a barrel of black powder, and walked over with a huge grin. "Where'd you get that?" "Oh, come on, son. Your old man still keeps a few barrels around for fun." Zhou sighed beside him. "Dad, that's gunpowder, not a toy." But Mr. Zhao had already thrown the barrel over his shoulder and ran off, laughing. "Just one? You're so stingy." Seeing his father all excited, Zhu muttered, "Please don't blow up the house." Suddenly, a loud noise came from the backyard. No, his father hadn't blown himself up with a barrel of gunpowder. In fact, he turned around and saw his mother with frying pans strapped to her head, wielding a trident, standing firmly on a yoga roller, training with his little sister who was mimicking her moves. Zhao watched the scene and thought, "Definitely mother, stay long. I came to speak with you." She turned to him, tone serious. "The village committee has started organizing the defenses. It's going well so far, but I contacted the county police station last night, and since then, nothing. No messages. And this morning, no signal at all." Zhou quickly checked his phone. No signal. He frowned. Strange, this didn't happen last time. Xiao Xia continued, her voice tense. "Something's not right. If we're isolated, we might miss something crucial, like reinforcements that could be on their way." She looked into his eyes. "Zhou, I need you to come with me to the county. We have to find out what's going on." Zhou fell silent, visibly worried about the request. Xiao Xia, noticing his hesitation, bowed deeply. Sorry, I know your brother went through hell yesterday, and now I'm asking you to risk yourself again. She lifted her face, eyes resolute. But I have to go to the county and find out what's happening. It's my responsibility, and you're the best fighter. I know that in that moment, you understood those creatures better than anyone. Joe's mother stepped in and gently interrupted. That's enough. Xiaoxia. If it weren't for you yesterday, my foolish son might not have even come back. See. Xiaoxia turned toward the voice. Surprised, Nisjo added, what happened to me was his choice. Don't blame yourself. Xiaoxia, wait here a moment. Then she turned to her son. Come with me. Joe looked at his mother and followed her inside. Inside, she quietly rummaged through an old wooden shelf without turning around. She spoke softly. Your father and I are your parents. We shouldn't hold you back. We're here to protect you, not to weigh you down. Just look at you, all grown up and still making your little sister worry. With that, she pulled out a long blade wrapped in an old cloth. Time had aged it, but the blade still gleamed faintly. Joe and Xiaoxia walked side by side toward the county, leaving the village behind. Joe's mother stood quietly at the gate, watching until their figures disappeared into the distance. A faint smile appeared on her face as she murmured to herself, those two make quite a pair, don't they? Meanwhile, deep in the cave, Zhou Ming remained motionless, waiting for his body to react to the zombie corpse he had just swallowed. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching. Thinking it was his brother, he opened his mouth. Wait, don't come any closer yet. Then he felt something wet pass over his boots. With a serious expression, he dipped his finger in the liquid and brought it to his nose. The moment he smelled it, his expression changed. It was gasoline. Before he could react, a spark lit at the cave entrance. A deafening explosion erupted. Flames roared through the tunnel, and Zhou Ming was engulfed in fire in an instant. Meanwhile, Zhu and Xiaoxia were on the road toward the county in search of help. Xiaoxia sat in the passenger seat, nervously looking out the window and humming softly. Totally off-key, poor thing. Zhu glanced sideways and couldn't help but think, wow, she really has no musical talent. Noticing his look, Xiaoxia blushed slightly and murmured, sorry, I sing when I'm nervous. I know it sounds awful, but Zhou didn't laugh. In fact, he felt a strange warmth in his chest. She was clearly scared, but still kept going. Yeah, he thought, that's the Xiaoxia I know. With so many unexpected variables this time, he realized he couldn't rely solely on memories from his past life. He had to trust her sensitivity to zombies. That was something he needed to count on. Without warning, he said, Xiaoxia, you should stay at my house. She froze, turning to him with slightly flushed cheeks. Why would I do that? She asked softly. Zhao didn't even notice the change in her tone. He was still deep in thought. If he told her about the powers she would have in the future, she would never believe him. So he simply said directly, because I need you to be safe. I can't afford to lose you. Just as Xiaoxia, still blushing, was about to ask what he meant by that. The road ahead was completely blocked by a landslide. They quickly got out of the car to check. Staring at the mountain of debris, Xiaoxia sighed in frustration. There's no way we're getting to the county like this. Zhao didn't respond right away, but inside he was tense. This road was fine in my past life. Something's changed. It's not just the timing, it's the entire path. If this route really is blocked, we'll have serious problems with future supply runs. He finally took a deep breath. Let's go back to the village. We'll figure something out. Xiaoxia fell silent. On the way back, Zhou's mind was racing. They had enough supplies for now, but no signal, no escape. Everything felt like it was closing in. Suddenly, the car jolted violently and began to slide toward the edge of the bridge. Zhou slammed the brakes, gripping the steering wheel tightly. With a screech of the tires, the vehicle stopped just inches from falling. They both jumped out quickly to see what had happened. Xiaoxia looked down at the ground, her voice trembling. Is this it? Zhu's face darkened. Don't come closer. This is a strip of nails. Someone put this here on purpose. At that moment, a mocking voice echoed from above. Well, Zhu. Didn't take you long to cozy up with our lovely village chief, huh? Gotta admit, I'm impressed. They looked up and saw Lin Ji crouched on the railing, spinning a pistol between his fingers. Zhou's eyes filled with menace as he looked up coldly. What do you want, Lin Ji? What do I want? You wiped out half of my crew last night, remember? As their leader, I can't just let that slide, right? He jumped down and began walking toward them, step by step. Zhou scoffed. Looking for revenge? Then go fight the zombies. Not us. His eyes narrowed. But after the way you curled up last night, I doubt you have the guts. Lin Ji's face twisted in rage. You bastard. I'll kill you right here. Zhou calmly rested his hand on the hilt of his sword, a cold smile forming. Go ahead, try me. But just as the tension peaked, Lin Ji suddenly turned the gun and fired at Xiaoxia. Without warning, the gunshot rang out and she collapsed, blood spreading across her shirt. Zhou froze, eyes wide. Lin Ji, he roared, you sick bastard. Lin Ji burst into laughter. That's more like it. Now you're feeling it, huh? He grinned cruelly. If I want to hurt you, I'll go after the ones you care about most. Lin Ji smirked maliciously. Oh, and I almost forgot to tell you. I saw your brother get bitten last night. You didn't have the guts to finish him off, did you? So I did you a favor and blew up the whole mine. Zhou froze as if struck by lightning. In a blink, his eyes turned red with rage. He drew his sword and charged at Lin Ji. The latter smiled wickedly. Yes, idiot. That's exactly what I wanted. As he raised the gun to shoot, a dark shadow shot out from the forest, sank its teeth into Lin Ji's arm. and ripped it off. Lin Ji fell to the ground, screaming in agony, squealing like a pig being slaughtered. As he stared at the creature in horror, Joe stopped abruptly, stunned by the sudden chaos. His eyes narrowed. That's a tear of the zombie wolf. Meanwhile, back in the village, Xiao Xia was sitting on the roof, legs swinging as she grumbled. Why hasn't second brother come back yet? Suddenly, loud knocks echoed from the front gate. A voice shouted urgently, "Is Zhou home?" "Open up." Xiao Xia peeked over the door. "Brother Guan." "Uncle?" "No, my brother isn't here. What's going on?" Guang suddenly pointed to the mountain ridge and shouted, "Look over there." Xiao Xia quickly raised her phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it into the distance. When the beam of light hit the slope, her eyes widened completely, frozen in place. Coming down the slopes, swarms of zombies moved like a black tide toward the village. Meanwhile, Lin Ji was lying on the ground, bleeding, nearly unconscious, and he wondered if this was how he was going to die. The zombie wolf slowly turned its bloodshot eyes toward Zhu. Instinct took over, and he screamed, "This isn't good. He found me." With a deafening howl, the creature charged straight at him. Zhao dodged to the side with lightning reflexes, slashing his blade across the creature's chest as it passed. Blood burst out violently. The zombie wolf crashed to the ground, howling in pain. Zhao caught his breath, eyes fixed on the wounded creature. Great, night is falling. His power isn't at full strength, but if it gets dark, Xiao Xia and I won't stand a chance. We need to end this before sunset. Suddenly, a chorus of deep, guttural howls echoed through the forest. Zhou froze. But zombies? Then he understood. His expression darkened. No, this is a horde. His gaze turned toward the distance, where a wave of undead was advancing through the trees. Wait, wasn't the village chief the origin? But he's already dead. Then, what about the bats? Could they be the true cause? Just as Zhu connected the dots, the zombie wolf lunged at him with a blood-curdling roar. Its claws came down with brutal force, trying to tear him to pieces. At the very last moment, Zhou twisted his body, narrowly avoiding a fatal strike. His heart pounded. How is it still this fast? It should be dying. Then he noticed the wound he had just opened on the creature's chest was closing up, healing rapidly, right before his eyes, before he could react. The creature opened its massive jaws and charged again, trying to shred him. Meanwhile, deep in the cave where Zhou Ming had been buried, the rubble still trembled from the recent explosion. A deep rumble echoed louder and louder through the tunnel. Then, boom, an explosion of force sent rocks flying in all directions. Moments later, Zhou Ming emerged from the smoke. His body radiated a terrifying crimson glow. A cold, twisted smile formed on his face. Back on the bridge, Bingbing stared, horrified, as the zombie wolf charged at Zhu. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "No, please, no." Just as the zombie wolf closed its jaws around Zhu, a strange red aura erupted from his body. A fiery glow pulsed like living energy beneath his skin. Power surged through his body, raw, wild, uncontrollable. It was as if his entire being was burning and being reborn. With a guttural growl, Zhu drove his fist straight into the creature's jaw. The zombie wolf, completely caught off guard, was sent flying backward by the devastating blow. It let out a tortured scream, blood spraying from its mouth as it hit the ground. Zhao didn't give it a chance to recover. His eyes burned red as he advanced, raising his blade high. With a single brutal strike, he cleaved the creature in two. When the dust settled, Bingbing stared at the blood-soaked silhouette in disbelief. Her voice was barely a whisper, "Zhao." He turned to her with a soft smile. "Yeah, I'm here," he said, collapsing weakly to the ground. Bingbing gave a faint smile. "Haha, as long as you're okay." Bingbing looked at the split zombie wolf, then at Chu, who remained calm and steady. She let out a quiet laugh. "You're ridiculously strong. And somehow that didn't even surprise me. Maybe because, deep down, she thought, I've already started to believe he can fix anything." Joe looked at his own hands. The power flowing through his body hadn't faded yet. It pulsed, wild yet controlled. Where did this come from? Could it be an awakening? But something didn't add up. In his past life, no one awakened without a crystal core, and he'd never used one. He snapped out of the trance, his eyes locking on the swarm of undead closing in on them. "Now's not the time to talk," he said sharply. "We need to move. We're surrounded. If we stay here, we're dead." Noticing her leg injury, he stepped forward. "You can't run like that. I'll carry you. Just hold on tight. It's going to be a rough ride." Gritting her teeth, Bingbing tried to stand. Her face was pale with pain, but she nodded firmly. "Okay." The zombie horde roared like a crashing wave. Their snarls sliced through the air as they approached. Zhao didn't hesitate. He threw Bingbing onto his back and ran toward the village with everything he had. The outline of the village appeared in sight, but the undead were closing in fast. Their footsteps sounded like death drums. He looked back, calculating quickly. Too many. Even if I manage to beat them, I can't protect Bingbing. She'll get hurt. As he clenched his teeth and prepared to keep running, a loud roar echoed in the distance. The vehicle charged through the chaos like a missile. It was a heavily modified off-road truck, spewing massive fireballs from the rear exhaust, mowing down zombies like paper targets. As it reached Zhao, the driver made a sharp turn. The back end swung out, releasing a wall of flames that hurled the undead into the air, burning them to ashes in an instant. The truck skidded to a stop, and the driver's window rolled down, revealing Zhou's father with a cigarette dangling from his lips. With a big grin, he shouted, "Zhao, Daddy's here to save the day." In the passenger seat, Xiao Yang waved excitedly, a flame launcher ready for action. After picking them up, Zhao's father slammed the pedal, speeding back toward the village. Seeing that the undead were still chasing them, he shouted, "Gunner, fire 3 Zhao-style dragon bombs." "Got it." Zhao shouted back without hesitation, pulling 3 homemade bombs from his backpack and tossing them out the rear window. The flames erupted behind them, torching several zombies, but the creatures kept running, cloaked in fire. Zhou's father snorted coldly, "Still chasing us while burning? All right then, let's take it up a notch." He tossed a barrel of gunpowder out the window. With a snap of his fingers, he flicked a lit cigarette right into it. A massive explosion lit up the night, engulfing the road in an infernal wall of fire. Xiao Yang cheered from the back seat, eyes sparkling. "That was insane. Let's go." Meanwhile, Zhu and Bingbing exchanged a look of helpless disbelief. This family might actually be crazier than the zombies. Suddenly, Zhou remembered there was a first aid kit under the seat. He reached down to grab it. When he pulled out the bandages and ointments, Xiao Yang snatched them from his hands and scolded him. "Hey, you don't just grab a girl's leg like that." And with a mischievous smile, she added, "Unless there's something going on between you two that I don't know about." Bingbing blushed and let out a shy laugh. Zhou rolled his eyes, muttering mentally, "This brat, always stirring things up." Ignoring her, he turned to his dad. "So Dad, how are things at home?" Zhu's father kept his eyes on the rearview mirror and replied calmly, "We're okay for now. The horde hasn't broken through the village yet." Zhou nodded and then glanced at the explosives in the back seat. "By the way, all that dynamite, you seriously made that while smoking next to it?" Zhu's father laughed proudly. "Of course. Back in the day, I was obsessed with explosives. I worked in the mines. I was the demolition expert on the team. When the mines dried up, there was nothing left to blow up. I tried messing with fireworks at home, but your mom shut that down fast." He sighed deeply, shaking his head like a man who had lost his true calling. Zhou suddenly remembered something and asked, "Wait, that kitchen explosion last year, was that you?" His dad visibly tensed, his voice trembling. "What? Of course not. Don't be ridiculous." Zhou narrowed his eyes. "Dad, you're shaking." His father mumbled, "Don't tell your mother." Moments later, they arrived at the front gate. As soon as they got out, high-pitched screams echoed from the yard. Zhou's father's face turned serious. He ran to the door and banged hard. "Damn it, it's locked from the inside." Without hesitation, Zhou charged forward, bent his knees, and smashed the door open with a powerful knee strike. In the courtyard, they were met with a surreal scene. Zhou's mother was casually holding a zombie thrashing by the neck with one hand. She looked at the creature and said coldly, "Oh, it's you, Aunt Zhang, from the neighboring village. Been a while, huh?" Zhou's father and Ying peeked from behind the shattered door, shuddered at her furious expression, and quietly hid behind the wall. Zhou stood at the front, cautiously calling out, "Mom." She didn't even look at him. Still holding her frying pan, she growled at the zombie. "So you really jumped out to scare me, huh? You think just because you turned into this, you don't have to pay me back." Zhu's mother smashed the pan furiously against the zombie woman. "And another thing, last time we played cards, you still owed me 500. I gave your son 600 bucks when he went off to college. But when my eldest passed, you didn't give him a cent. And you had the nerve to gossip about us? You deserve this." Zhou stared at the scene in shock, slowly approaching his father. When did Mom get this strong? He thought. His dad took a slow drag from his cigarette. "She's always been like that. Back then, your mom was the most feared woman in 10 villages. Took 3 to 5 men just to get near her. Things only calmed down after she met me. To be honest, she kind of forced me to marry her." A flying frying pan hit the back of his head. From inside the courtyard, his wife's voice rang out, cold and sharp. "Liar, you were the one who begged to marry me." She turned and shot Zhou a furious glare. "And you smashed the front gate like some kind of hero, huh? Just wait till I get my hands on you, Zhou." The boy took a step back instantly, trying to escape. But Bingbing spoke quickly, "Auntie, please don't blame him. He was genuinely worried about you." The moment those words left her mouth, Zhao's mother froze mid-step. She slowly turned to Bingbing, her face softening like a switch had been flipped. "Oh, Bingbing's here too. I was just joking earlier. Don't take it seriously. And he's super calm, you know?" Zhao stood still, staring at the scene with a blank look. Her acting is scarier than the zombies. At that moment, a chilling roar came from the wall near his father. A zombie had climbed up and was snarling viciously. But before it could jump, it was struck mid-air and hurled back outside. At the top of the wall, Huang shouted urgently, "Enough talk. They're getting in. The zombies are invading the village, and there's a whole group coming from the west." Zhu's eyes narrowed. He summoned the energy within him, a red light pulsing across his body, and then launched himself straight into the fight. He saw his father throwing explosives, his sister operating an improvised cannon, and his mother charging with a cast iron frying pan. Zhu's heart filled with conviction. "This time we fight together. We won't let any of them through, and I'm not alone anymore. With my family by my side, we'll survive this tide of death." Suddenly, the zombies at the rear began to retreat. Zhou blinked in disbelief. "Look, they're pulling back. Or are they afraid?" Zhou frowned. "No, zombies don't feel fear." As if in response, the zombies reappeared, this time carrying ladders, crowbars, even saws, all organized. The protagonist's father was stunned. You've got to be kidding me. They have tools now. Are we fighting zombies or a siege army? Joe's voice turned cold. They're not acting on instinct. Someone's controlling them. Amid the chaos, Joe suddenly spotted a figure on a distant rooftop. He squinted. It was Lin Ji. Yes, the man who should have died in the explosion was now standing, face twisted, with a cold and disturbing smile. In that moment, waves of zombies surged toward Joe's family compound. Relentless, like a massive tide, Joe's father cursed through gritted teeth. Damn it, why are they all heading straight here? He turned and yelled explosives. In a panic, Xiao Ying said, "We're out. We used them all." Then came Huang's voice. "Zhao, some are climbing the flank." He turned sharply and saw several zombies scaling the side of the wall. His heart sank. A diversion. They're using tactics now. Looking down, he saw Bingbing and her parents surrounded, fighting the undead with the little strength they had left. The whole family was locked in a desperate struggle. Joe's eyes narrowed. The red light flared again. "Dad, Mom, hold the courtyard. Leave the rest to me." With that, his power burst forth and he leaped off the wall, diving straight into the heart of the horde. Joe's father watched his son plunge into the swarm of zombies. Panic rose in his chest. He shouted, his voice cracking with fear. In the next moment, the zombies piled onto Joe, burying him beneath a mountain of snapping jaws and claws. But under that crushing weight, Joe felt no fear. He closed his eyes and felt the energy roar inside him like a volcanic storm. Gripping his sword tightly, he growled through clenched teeth. Blood barrier, groundbreaker, strength skill, blue blood. In one explosive motion, he swung his blade. A crimson horde of power erupted from his body, obliterating every zombie within reach, tearing them into flying chunks of flesh and bone. When the blood settled, Zhao was standing, gasping for air. The move had triggered a memory from his past life. He had seen someone from the Dawn Legion before, Supreme Commander Point, one of the most powerful skill users that ever lived. He used this exact move, but Zhu knew his version of blue blood was still far from perfect. "I don't need perfection. I don't need a need to be the strongest. I just need the strength to protect those I love." He looked toward the twisted figure on the rooftop. "These zombies are nothing. The real threat is whoever's controlling them. If you want to end the chaos, eliminate the king." As another wave of zombies charged at him, Joe smiled, eyes glowing red. "You really think this trash is enough to stop me?" Just as Joe finished speaking, a deafening roar erupted behind him. A chill ran down his spine. He turned to see a zombie leaping toward Bing Bing. Before it could reach her, Joe's mother smashed the creature's face with her frying pan, sending it flying. She ran over to Bing Bing, her voice full of concern. "Are you all right? Did it bite you?" Bing Bing, panting, shook her head. "I'm fine, Auntie Gexi." "Where's Joe? I saw him jump just a second ago." From the front yard, Xiao Ying shouted excitedly. "I saw. He looked just like a superhero, slicing through that zombie like it was nothing. He'll be fine." But before the words were even finished, a loud crash echoed through the air. Everyone froze. Slowly she turned, and there, among broken rocks and dust, was Zhu, injured, trying to get up. He shouted, hoarse, "Stay back. Don't get near the run." Before him stood a mutant zombie bear, twice the size of a truck, glowing eyes and shards of red steel jutting from its spine. Each breath it took released steam like smoke from a furnace. It wasn't just watching, it was hunting. Joe's body trembled in pain, but he forced himself to stand, clenched his fists, eyes locked on the beast, his voice low and determined. "I'm the only one who can face this now, and I won't let my family get hurt. Not again." Joe's eyes blazed red as he unleashed every drop of power within him. A storm of blood-red energy erupted around him like wildfire. He stood firm before the monstrous bear, teeth gritted. "If I have to die today, I'll die protecting my family." In the courtyard, his father, mother, and sister screamed in panic. Zhao didn't move an inch. The giant zombie bear roared and charged, its claw descending like a guillotine. Zhao dodged to the side at the last second. But before the claw could strike him, a thunderous impact echoed, followed by a familiar voice. Well, so you can use that kind of power, huh? And here I thought you were bluffing." The dust cleared, revealing Zhao Ming calmly blocking the bear's claw with one hand. "Sorry I'm late, little bro." Joe's eyes widened in shock and joy. Zhao Ming stretched his shoulders with a smile. "Took me a while in the mountains to get used to this power." He glanced at the bear. "Now watch closely. This is how you really use it." With a swing of his arm, Zhao Ming hurled the giant bear into the air. It flew like a derailed train, crashing into a pile of ruins with a deafening boom. Ming brushed off the dust and grinned. "Huh? Still breathing, huh? Tough bastard, this giant hamster." Ming turned calmly and said, "Man, leave it to me. Go handle what only you can." He turned slowly, still standing on the distant rooftop. Memories from his past life flooded his mind. His family died before him. His own helpless screams in the night, the bitterness, the rage, the endless nightmares. "This time, with the power in my hands, I'll destroy everything that threatens them." Zhao stepped forward, voice cold and sharp. "So you're still alive, huh?" Lin Ji turned slowly. His once severed arm was now replaced by a grotesque lupine claw. He let out a low, raspy laugh. "No, now you're speaking to someone else. The old Lin Ji is dead." He grinned with wild eyes and exposed fangs. "This body has broken free from the limits of humanity. Zhao, part zombie, part man. Intelligence and control in one. I command the horde. I retain my mind. In this apocalypse, I am the king beneath the zombie swarm." The hordes advanced toward the building. Ling, standing with his eyes closed, Bathed in the wave of dark power surging through his body, he smirked. You know, Ju, I really should thank you. If you hadn't sliced that zombie wolf to pieces, I wouldn't have gotten that crystal core handed to me on a silver platter. His voice dropped, lips curling into a cruel smile. I've been thinking about how I should repay you for that gift, and I finally decided. He didn't even have time to finish. A single flash of steel. Joe's blade came down hard. Lin Ji's head split clean in two. Blood gushed out. Joe sheathed his sword with a cold expression. Still the same coward, just with a louder mouth. And you think you have the right to call yourself king? He turned, eyes sweeping the battlefield. Now that Lin Ji is down, my brother should have less pressure on his end. But then a chilling laugh echoed behind him. That's it. Joe froze. He turned slowly, only to see Lin Ji's body rising again. The cut in his skull was sealing itself shut. The flesh pulsed, bones reassembled with sickening cracks. Lin Ji's eyes now glowed with a fierce red as he smiled. His voice was deeper, more monstrous. Admit it, Lin Ji, your sword can't kill me. Joe's eyes widened. He immediately raised his blade in front of his chest. He inherited the zombie wolf's regeneration. I have to finish this now. But before he could strike, Lin Ji appeared beside him like a shadow. His voice dripped like poison into Zhou's ear. We are the same Zhou. This is our era. Join me. The dead will serve us. The living will feed us. Humanity will kneel like cattle under our rule. He gestured toward the approaching hordes. I even brought you a little gift. I wiped out those lesser bloodlines around you to prepare the home for our reign. The zombie tide had already reached the walls. In the courtyard, Zhou's parents and the others were struggling to hold the line. Nearby, Uncle Neo shouted, There, Zhou. The west side is falling. Zhou's father gasped, sweat streaming down his face. Hold on just a bit longer. Xiao Zhu and Xiao Shu will finish this soon. But before he could catch his breath, a massive impact shook the ground. The corpse of a giant bear crashed beside him, kicking up a cloud of blood and dust. From the other side of the wall, Zhao Ming's voice echoed with a touch of irony. Man, that thing really held on. Let's use it to plug the gap. Zhao's father turned quickly, tense but relieved. Xiao, how's your brother? Xiao looked at the zombies approaching from all sides. He clenched his jaw. There was no retreat now. Turning to his father, he said firmly, Don't worry. Zhao has more potential than I ever did. He'll finish this. Meanwhile, Zhao was struck again by Lin Ji, sent flying and crashing to the ground with a deafening thud. Dust exploded around him. He lay there, blood trickling from his mouth, his body in ruins. Lin Ji descended, crouching over the rubble with a twisted grin. Ah, what a disappointment. Is this all you've got, Zhou? There's still time. Kneel now, and I'll forgive you for raising your blade against your king. But before the words could leave his mouth, a crimson flash cut through the air. Zhou lunged with his blade, slicing open Lin Ji's chest and launching him through 3 stone walls. With the dust still swirling, Zhou stood tall, eyes sharp, voice cold. Humans don't walk with faith, especially those who bear their fangs at my family. He marched toward the crumpled figure among the rubble, sword still dripping blood, and with a voice like judgment, he declared, Lin, there's only one thing left for me to do. Kill you? The wound on Lin's chest began to close almost instantly as he stood back up, imposing. He licked the blood from his claw. Zhou stood there with blood on his own claw, voice cold and threatening. Oh really? That's a shame, Zhou. Then I sentence you to death. In the blink of an eye, he lunged. His claw came down like a restless guillotine, slicing the air with terrifying force. Zhou barely managed to raise his blade in time, sparks exploding at the point of impact. He's faster, stronger. Zhou's arms trembled under the strain. I can't hold out much longer. Strike after strike came down on him. Lin was relentless. A searing pain ripped through Zhao's arm. A deep gash opened, cutting through even his blood barrier. Reacting, he kicked backward and landed a few steps away. Gasping, he looked at the wound, eyes narrowing. Even my blue blood shield isn't holding anymore. I'm reaching my limit. Across the battlefield, Lin mocked him, licking his claw. Impressive, Zhu. You dodged that? I honestly thought I'd be admiring your insides by now. Zhao felt his strength slipping away, his vision starting to blur. The blue blood, his aura, flickered, fading. But then he looked up, locking eyes with the monster before him, tightening his grip on the sword. If I only have one strike left, then let it end him. Before Zhao could react, Lin appeared right in front of him. He smiled wickedly, eyes glowing red. Got you? Honestly, I don't even know how strong I am at full power. Zhao hesitated for a second, long enough. Lin Ji's claw slashed across his chest, deep and brutal. Blood gushed out, staining the ground. But in that instant, Zhou reached into his coat. With one last surge of will, he hurled a homemade explosive straight into Lin's face. Enjoy the surprise, bastard! Flames roared, engulfing the area in an infernal blaze. From within the smoke, Lin's voice echoed, cold and mocking. A Molotov? You really think that's going to kill me? As the smoke cleared, Lin simply stepped out unscathed. But Zhao had vanished. He blinked and muttered. He ran away, then he laughed, a horrifying smile. Maniacal. Insane. Ha ha ha. Your blood smells like a flare in the darkness. You think you can hide from me? The smile vanished. His eyes turned ice cold. Run as much as you like, Zhu. I'll find you. And when I do, I'll tear you apart, piece by piece. Elsewhere, Zhou collapsed inside a dark convenience store, panting. He clutched his wound. Sweat, blood, and pain mingled, but his hand still gripped the sword, Zhou leaned against a cold shelf, eyes fixed on his injured arm. The bleeding had stopped, not fully healed, but enough. He felt the flicker of surprise. So the blue blood can heal. But his relief didn't last. His energy was nearly gone. Only one move left. One last chance. Outside the gas station, voices echoed. And then Lin Ji's voice boomed, cruel and mocking. A gas station? Really, Joe? Some people died senselessly. But you picked your coffin like a peasant. His claw scratched a rusted van, sparks flying with each drag. The metal screamed in protest. He slowed his pace, his voice now low and calculated, like a predator explaining the rules of the hunt. Tell me, do you know why wolves hunt even when they're not hungry? Lin Ji walked slowly, his voice almost reverent, to savor the taste of terror, the crushing of desperate hope. When every clever trick fails, that moment of pure collapse, that's the best seasoning. With a twisted grin, he kicked a nearby car hard. The vehicle flipped like a toy, landing with a metallic crash. He looked to the ground, following the trail of blood. It led to an almost invisible tripwire, faintly glistening with gasoline. Above him, a glass Molotov, ready to drop at the slightest touch. Lin grinned wider. You really thought I'd be dumb enough to follow this pathetic trail? To walk straight into your trap like some blind idiot? He raised his claw slowly, eyes narrowing. No. The stronger scent of blood is coming from above. With a sudden leap, Lin Ji slashed upward. His claw tore through the roof. The ceiling shattered, collapsing in a storm of steel and wood. Debris flew, and amid the dust, a blood-stained jacket landed at Lin Ji's feet. He picked it up, confused. His eyes narrowed. A jacket? But before he could react, Joe burst from the shadows right in front of him. In one fluid motion, he threw a handful of powder into Lin Ji's face. Lin Ji screamed in pain. Clutching his burning eyes, Joe stepped in, his voice calm and cold. That's salt. Couldn't smell it? A faint smile crossed his lips. But then again, you can't feel anything anymore, can you? Can't see either, right? Joe took another step. His voice was cold and precise. You inherited the zombie wolf's strength, but also its greatest weakness. A wolf's nose has over 200 million olfactory cells, capable of detecting more than 2 million scents. That kind of sensitivity makes salt pure agony. He stared at the writhing Lin Ji. Most let their guard down when they think they've seen through the trap. You call yourself king, but you're no different. Just a blind dog choking on your own arrogance. Lin Ji roared, eyes full of fury. Joe, I'm going to kill you. I'll tear you to pieces. Zhao raised his sword. As always, you won't get the chance. Blood energy surged through his arm, enveloping the sword in a crimson storm of power. World splitter, blue blood. The blade came down in a flash of red light. Lin was slammed into the ground, a shockwave shaking the earth. Smoke filled the air until a crater came into view. Joe stood at the edge, staring down into the pit. Still alive, he murmured. Damn, these monsters are really hard to kill. Lin lay crushed at the bottom of the crater, bloody and gasping, but still growling through his teeth. I am the king. I don't die. But something changed. His eyes widened in shock as he noticed a liquid rising around him. Thick, oily, and reeking of gasoline. What is this? He screamed, panic replacing rage. Joe's voice cut through the tension, cold and calm. Those little Molotov cocktails weren't enough. He stood at the edge of the crater, looking toward the sky. So I thought, why not see if a full underground fuel tank can send a monster like you straight to hell? His tone never rose. No anger, no fear, just a final stillness. This gas station is your coffin. Goodbye. Boom. Back at the village, Zhao's father stood at the gate, weapons in hand. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the horizon. He looked up, confused. What was that? My God. Then, a bright fireball bloomed in the distance, a second sun rising over the hills. Zhao's father fell silent, watching the flaming glow on the horizon. The sun has risen, he murmured. Look, shouted the girl. Excited, everyone turned. The horde of zombies that had surrounded them all night was retreating. As the tide of death slowly receded, the exhausted defenders finally smiled, relieved to be alive. Meanwhile, Joe looked at the rising sun. He smiled slightly and began walking back home. But a weak voice called from behind. Leaning against a broken wall was a pale figure, nearly unconscious. Joe, help me. Her head slumped forward as her strength gave out. Joe froze and turned slowly. Back home, Xiao Ying stood with arms crossed, staring at her brother. Bro, are you really a pervert? What kind of guy undresses a girl in public? Joe sighed, clearly frustrated. I just wanted to check if Li Qin had been bitten. You can't just bring someone home just because they seem fine. Many groups were wiped out because of that exact mistake, he added, almost in his own defense. And I wasn't wearing a shirt either, so technically it was fair. Joe rolled his eyes. That only makes you seem even more like a creep. Good thing I stopped you in time. Joe started to respond, but before he could continue, the nearby door creaked open. Bing Bing walked out calmly. Li Qin is fine, she said. I checked her. She's just exhausted, mentally and physically. She'll wake up soon. She paused, looking at the two of them. Why are you making those weird faces? Zhao winced, forcing a smile. Nothing. We're just happy you're okay. Xiao Ying turned to her, her voice slightly warmer. Thanks for everything. Bing Bing. Bing Bing lowered her gaze and replied softly. I didn't really do anything. You guys were the ones who did the hard work. After a short rest, Huan, Uncle Neo, and Bing Bing prepared to leave. They wanted to sweep through the village in search of more survivors while it was still daylight, part of their duty as members of the village council. Just before they left, Ju called out to Bing Bing, seeing the guilt in her eyes. Bing Bing, don't blame yourself. No one can stop a zombie tide in advance. We can't save everyone, but as long as we're alive, there's still hope. Bing Bing turned, smiling gently. I know, thanks. From the car, Ming laughed. Not bad, little bro, you're finally learning to talk like a human being. Zhao watched the group leave and murmured, this time, the ending is finally different. Ming raised an eyebrow. Ha, what are you talking about? Nothing? Forget it? He sighed. Then he turned the ignition key. Vroom, vroom. Let's go, we still have to deal with those bodies. The two drove toward the mountains for the final cleanup. In front of the burning corpses, Joe spoke in a low voice. These mutant corpses need to be incinerated. If animals eat this stuff, we could be facing the next disaster. Ming brushed the dust off his hands and smiled. Well, looks like we can finally go home and actually sleep. Oh, and Joe, make sure to stop by the gas station. Wash the car, it's stinking. Now I'm sure someone farted in there. Zhao scratched his face, embarrassed about the station, then frowned. Wait, why should I? Ming threw an arm around his shoulders with a smug grin. Because I'm your older brother? Got a problem with that? Zhao narrowed his eyes. Oh, you know the rules, man. Ming raised an eyebrow. Seriously? You sure you can still win? Zhao smirked. Please, I've never lost a game of ghost tag. They quickly set up the game. Ming would be the ghost hunter, Ju the ghost. The rules were simple. The hunter counted to 10 while the ghost ran. If caught within 3 minutes, the hunter wins. The ghost just has to run like hell. As Zhou's energy burst forth, he dashed away. Ming laughed behind him. You're really using that trick. You remember I can do that too, right? Before Zhao could react, Ming was already right behind him. He lunged to grab him, but Ju stopped on a dime. He twisted his body and dodged like a shadow. The two of them shot through the forest, leaping over roots, weaving between trees, locked in a relentless chase. Suddenly, Ju jumped high, aiming for a branch above. Ming blinked in surprise, then smiled. Huh? Gonna fly, are you? Without warning, he ran straight toward the tree. When Zhou reached the branch, the tree toppled with a crash. Startled, Zhu adjusted midair and landed safely behind it on the ground. Ming was still smiling, blade in hand, fresh from the slash. Thought you could escape by going up? No chance. Zhao had barely paused when he sensed something massive coming from behind. There he was. He turned just in time to see Ming hurling an entire tree trunk at him. Zhou crossed his arms, braced himself, and blocked with full force. The brothers stood still, one pushing, the other resisting, energy crackling between them. Ming laughed, voice full of provocation. Running again, little bro. Zhao didn't respond to his brother's taunts, too focused on holding back the crushing weight of the trunk. Amazed by the raw power behind the strike, he realized he couldn't resist it head-on and let the impact carry him backward. Moments later, the trunk smashed into a cliffside with a boom, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. Ming, standing in the rubble, scratched his head sheepishly. Odd, did I overdo it? He shouted, you down there? But no answer came. As the dust settled, he saw no one. Then a pebble struck the top of his head, and Zhou's voice echoed from above. Time's up. The ghost wins. This round is mine. Zhou Ming looked up at the cliff and shouted, when did you get up there, you sneaky? Zhou lightly jumped, smiling as he leaned against the cliff to absorb the landing. I've learned a lot about how our powers work, Zhou said, nodding. I got mine by absorbing the body of a zombie. You did too, right? Zhou shrugged and replied casually, something like that. Though in his mind he added, technically, that was in my past life. Then he finished. But I think my ability is a bit different. I can access other people's powers. Zhou Ming's eyes widened in surprise. Wait, you mean you can use my powers? Like copy them? It's not just a coincidence? Zhou nodded, something like that. Your ability, Blood Bastion, boosts strength, speed, and defense. And that little crimson aura around you can block most physical attacks. Based on our little spar, I think I managed to replicate about 70%. Zhou Ming raised an eyebrow. 70% and I still lost? Damn. And that's not all. Zhou added, I think I can assess your abilities in pretty fine detail. Zhou Ming blinked. Wait, are we talking about RPG character stats now? Like you have a personal interface or something? Not exactly, said Zhou, flexing his fingers. It's more like instinct, like I can feel the numbers behind someone's strength. If an average adult stat is 20, your power and agility would be around 90. Your endurance, maybe 50. As for intelligence, wait, Zhou Ming interrupted, smiling. Don't tell me, does it make me smarter too? Zhou gave a side smile. Actually, 0. Honestly, watching you fight a tree trunk was kind of painful. Zhou Ming threw an arm around his shoulders with a playful growl. Careful kid, my 0 IQ can still knock your teeth out. Then he suddenly remembered something. That zombie bear core, I stashed it in your drawer. Might be useful later. The brothers didn't know someone behind a tree was eavesdropping on their conversation. Later that night, in Zhou's room, Zhou Ming entered while his brother slept. She was searching for the zombie core. If she found it and absorbed it, she would finally gain superpowers too. The next morning, the weather was sunny, and birds bathed in the rays of sunlight. Zhou plowed the earth to plant and secure their future. Zhou didn't want to work, but as the youngest son, his mother made him. He thought his mother was being unfair since his brother was always free and only he had to work. But Zhou wasn't ordinary, so he used his ability to cultivate the soil. Laura was outside, gathering the courage to approach Zhu. She was wearing only a white shirt and in a way looked seductive. In the end, she decided to walk around the corner and called out to Zhao, who was up ahead. She was surprised by the scene in front of her eyes. Zhao turned and asked if everything was alright. Lara said she just wanted to thank him for saving her. Zhao replied that he was only fulfilling a promise made long ago and that she didn't owe him anything. The girl said that didn't matter. She served him tea and asked if he could help her again in the future. Zhao refused. He wasn't interested. The girl didn't expect such a direct response and asked why he refused. Zhao explained that he promised to help because Uncle Li took care of his family. He was just repaying a debt. Now that the debt was paid, there was no more reason to help her. Lara looked very downcast, looking down and saying with difficulty that she understood. After a while, Zhu finally cleared all the soil he had turned over. The young man realized that the Blood Buddha wasn't yet suitable for agricultural work and that he needed to improve control of the ability. Suddenly, there was knocking at the gate, and when he opened it, there were visitors. After they described the situation in the village, Zhu listened quietly and lowered his head, saying there was nothing to be done. Unfortunately, no one else survived in the village, and everyone grew sad at the news. The visitors blamed themselves for the deaths, feeling responsible. But Zhu said it wasn't their fault, and that they had done everything they could. Then the uncle asked what they should do now, since they didn't know how to improve the situation. Zhou answered that it was simple. First, they should take a bath, and then have dinner together, because no matter what happens, the most important thing is that they were still alive and well. After a while, Bingbing came out of the bath with wet hair. The clothes Zhou Ying gave her weren't enough, and she felt she looked a bit strange. At that moment, they called her for dinner, as the food was ready. She was a little embarrassed, but thought there was nothing wrong with it. At nightfall, when the sun had already disappeared over the horizon, only one house had its lights on in the entire village. Preparations for dinner were in full swing in the kitchen. Everyone chatted and joked. Aunt Olivia asked Bingbing to sit beside Zhou, and the girl happily agreed. From a distance, another girl watched her sit with envy but said nothing. Zhao offered a soda with a smile, and Bingbing accepted, then raised her cup and said that now, at that table were all the survivors of the village. Communication hadn't been restored yet, and they had no idea how things were elsewhere. But everyone had to survive at any cost. They had already survived a zombie wave, and that meant they were now one big family and should help each other in hard times. Beyond survival, they also needed to live with prosperity and well-being. Everyone raised their glasses after the speech and toasted to a bright future. Suddenly, the soda slipped from Juju's hands, and she fell from her chair. Zhou Ming immediately stood up and asked if she was okay. The girl was sweating heavily, her eyes turned red, and a barely audible growl escaped her mouth. With just a look, Zhou realized something was wrong with his sister. In the next moment, his sister suddenly got up and lunged at Zhou, screaming. She bit his arm, but Zhou was already prepared and had activated his ability beforehand. Everyone was shocked by the girl's behavior and didn't know what was happening. The father told his daughter to let go of her brother, saying they could solve everything if there was some misunderstanding. Someone there looked very frightened by the scene, as if they had seen something like that before. Finally, Xiao Ying's impulse began to weaken, and she slowly returned to normal. Zhao asked how she was. The girl regained her senses and backed away, looking at the confused faces around her. Everyone was stunned, and the father asked his daughter what that had been. She was confused and didn't know what to say. Embarrassed by so many eyes on her, she asked her brother for help. Suddenly, Zhou punched her in the stomach. She didn't expect it, and he carried her outside. Zhao said she had drunk too much soda and needed to clear her head. Everyone stared in a mix of fear and surprise, unable to say anything. Outside, Xiao Ying began to cry because she realized she had nearly attacked her family. Zhao scolded his sister for her recklessness and said she was lucky to still be alive after eating the core. The girl apologized and, with sadness in her voice, said she also wanted to have superpowers. But from all his past life experience, Zhao was genuinely surprised by his sister. He didn't know what would have happened if he hadn't realized something was wrong from the start. Zhao sighed, placed a hand on his sister's head, and said he would teach her how to use her new power. To begin, she should close her eyes and think of strength as a stream of air flowing through her body. The ability was already part of her instincts, and now having this ability, she needed to reopen the world. The girl opened her eyes, and Zhu asked what she saw in front of her. Zhao Ming said she saw the flow of life, and it felt like she could control it. She reached out to the plant in front of her, and it began to grow rapidly before her eyes. The girl was very surprised that she had accelerated the plant's growth. Zhao replied that apparently, that was exactly it, and the sister asked if he could do the same. The man was very happy because he had planted those potatoes that very day. But now, with the girl's ability, they no longer needed to worry about supplies. The girl was worried by what she heard. She didn't want her ability to be used for farming. She imagined she'd shoot laser beams, control thunder, or transform into a supergirl, but in the end, she was just a good farmer. Her brother was impressed by her imagination. Zhou knew that, after consuming the core, the chance of awakening an ability was very small, and the fact that both his brother and sister had achieved it clearly wasn't just luck. He believed it was all related to his own ability. Morning came, and as expected, the rooster tried to wake everyone, but suddenly there was silence, because Zhou grabbed the bird by the neck and told it to be quiet. Zhou asked his uncle where he got the rooster. The man said they also had a hen. He had raised her so she would lay eggs later. A few years ago, the farm was short on workers, and he had received a hen and a rooster as payment for helping out. Upon hearing there was a farm in the village, Ju remembered it wasn't far, so they went to the village's main farm. After a while, they arrived at their destination. Joe said they needed to take as many birds as possible to reproduce them at home, and also collect eggs with unborn chicks. With them, Ju said everyone on the farm was dead and asked whether they might suddenly turn into zombies, even though it was clear they had been stabbed to death. There was always the risk of danger. Ju reassured them, saying zombies didn't seem to come out during the day, but the most important thing was not to enter the basement where the sunlight didn't reach. They must not go. Zhao said they still didn't know what was happening out there. He couldn't believe all those people were really dead too. The uncle replied that people had a lot of effective weapons, and maybe help would come soon. Zhao said it was better not to have hope because the worst thing wasn't the zombies themselves, but the virus. Its consequences went far beyond human imagination, and they could only rely on themselves. After some time, Joe found an incubator and told the others to check how many there were. The uncle was very happy with the discovery, since it meant the mission was a success. Zhao asked the man whether the eggs were viable, to which he replied that artificial incubation was possible under the right conditions. Zhao said there were many eggs but no hens, and that was very strange. Joe agreed and said if they had all died, at least the bodies would be there. Suddenly, they heard a sound at the entrance and turned to see what it was. They discovered it was a goose. It made characteristic sounds of its species. Everyone was surprised by the sudden appearance of the goose. Zhao was very happy that there were still living animals on that farm. He asked Zhu for a bag and said he had experience capturing birds for slaughter. The young man suspected something but decided to stay quiet for now. Then the man began carefully capturing the goose and tying it up. He completed the task quickly and immobilized the goose with ease. But suddenly, the bird opened its beak and transformed into a monster. Zhao reacted in time and saved his uncle from the zombie goose. The man began to sweat and asked what that thing was, but they had no time to talk. They had to get out of there. Once outside, they stopped abruptly and were stunned by what they saw. An entire flock of ravenous zombie monsters was charging toward them. Surprisingly, they weren't afraid of the sunlight. It was very hard to fight the birds off because there were so many. Joe spotted an escape route. He called to the men behind him. They started running as fast as they could because they didn't want to be devoured. Zhao realized that Tainol and Huang were too slow, and at that pace, they wouldn't be able to escape the mutant geese. The men were already out of breath from so much running, drenched in sweat. The young man had to think fast. There was no other way, so he decided to try a new ability his sister had shown earlier. That power was different from what his brother had, and maybe more practical. The young man used his growth ability, and vines began to emerge from all sides. They extended across the path and attacked the monsters chasing the group. Zhao was glad to have slowed down the pursuers and said they needed to escape. But unfortunately, the path ahead was blocked by more zombie geese. They were surrounded. They looked into the monsters' mouths and thought it was over, but Joe shouted for everyone to quickly run inside. They ran into a room and slammed the door shut behind them. The men tried to catch their breath. The man looked out the window and said they'd be stuck there for a long time. Even if Zhao was strong enough to get out, Huang and the uncle certainly weren't. The young man replied that it was his own negligence that had put them in danger, and he'd do everything he could to make sure they got back unharmed. Zhao considered his other options, but still hesitated to use the Blood Buddha ability because of its limitations. But suddenly, Zhou found a computer and said that the farm's electricity hadn't been shut off yet. Zhao didn't understand how that information could help them in that situation. The man said that since the computer could turn on and reconnect to the internet, then there was a way out. Suddenly, the monsters began to break down the door. Zhou blocked the door and told Zhu to hurry, because it wouldn't hold for long. The man began typing quickly on the keyboard and spent another 3 minutes. He was very confident he'd find something that could help them. Zhou understood that in 3 minutes the door would definitely be broken down, and that it was better for him to strike first. So he activated his ability and kicked the door off. He then grabbed the broken door handle and glared at the monsters with anger. The zombie geese knew neither mercy nor fear when seeing a man. They attacked immediately. Zhao started clearing a path using the door as a shield in front of him. In the next moment, he used his ability and attacked with full force, destroying all the monsters in his way. Zhou sighed, as this bought at least a few minutes. But as he turned his attention to the remaining mass, he noticed it was moving and trying to pull itself together. The uncle asked Huang how much longer he was going to stall, since the noise clearly meant things weren't easy for Zhu. He replied there wasn't much time left. He mentally begged Zhou to just hang on a little longer. As soon as the file finished downloading to the computer, it would all be over. Meanwhile, Zhou was stunned by the creature forming right in front of him. In the next second, the monster lunged and attacked Zhou. It had tremendous strength, and Zhou's ability wasn't enough. With the impact, his throat started to bleed. At that moment, Uncle Neo ran out and told Zhou to flee with Zhou, saying he would try to hold off the monster. Zhou stood up and ran to the man, who yelled at him not to hesitate, otherwise they would all die there. But the young man was determined. He wanted to keep his promise to get them out at any cost. The mutant zombie began attacking its victims. Zhao felt as if the energies of growth, acceleration, and strength enhancement abilities were combining. It was a strange sensation. It was as if all this power wanted to break through. In the next moment, Joe landed a punch and the creature shattered into pieces. But shortly after, his power faded. Zhao was surprised and happy that his idea had worked after all. But he couldn't understand what this new power was. The blow had been incredibly strong. So strong that now he couldn't move his arm. There was no time to rest. But zombie geese appeared at the corner. And Zhu grew frustrated, realizing it was never ending, and also realized he was in danger. The danger crept closer by the second, and Joe couldn't move. He had used up all his strength. Suddenly, music began playing across the village, and the zombie geese heard it and stopped just inches away from Zhu. The melody was familiar to the monsters, and they immediately ran back in a rush. Zhao stepped out of the room and asked if everyone was okay. The uncle asked if he was the one who turned on the music. The man replied yes. Those sounds signaled feeding time at the farm. Since all the animals remembered that tune, they immediately ran to the feeding station. Fortunately, he had made it in time, but he said they'd never return to that farm again. They were very lucky the chicken eggs hadn't broken. Joe asked when the man had managed to grab them. He replied that while they were busy catching the goose, he managed to snatch a few. Joe asked if those eggs were mutant. The uncle replied that wasn't possible, since they were at most a week old and the monsters wouldn't have had time to lay them. Zhao sat on the back of the truck, thinking about the new power he had recently awakened. When they arrived home, a general meeting was held. Zhou Ying asked everyone to pay attention because she wanted to lay out the plan for the next action. To begin with, the security group responsible for patrolling and building protective structures included the chief commander, Zhou, and Zhou Ming. Next, the agricultural group was in charge of planting and raising animals. That included the uncle and the girl herself, since she had a very useful ability, and as a farmer, she would do everything with maximum quality. Next came the resource distribution group, which controlled the use of supplies and planned their allocation. Olivia and Layla were in charge. And finally, the intelligence group, the eyes and ears that searched for resources and analyzed the environment. In that group were Zhou and Bing Bing. As soon as the meeting ended and everyone had their roles defined, after some time, the young man gathered everything he needed in his backpack for another mission outside the village. Zhou packed everything that might be useful: grenades, Molotov cocktails, first aid kits, weapons, since he couldn't afford to repeat the mistakes of the past. Suddenly, he heard someone calling his name in a low voice. It was Layla. She approached silently and leaned against his back. The girl asked Zhou to take her with him. Zhou didn't understand the reason for the request. She tried to explain by saying she was afraid of Zhou Wing because she could turn into a zombie. The girl added that she just wanted to go with Zhou. She knew every corner of the village and could be useful. Layla said there were many supplies out there and that they could escape together. For sure, they could hold out until help arrived. The girl was completely relying on Zhou, and no one else knew that place like she did. Looking ahead, the girl saw Zhao's cold, threatening expression. He was very attached to his family and didn't tolerate any disrespect toward them, and the girl had just suggested he abandon them. He told her to repeat what she'd said, because if she did, she'd be expelled from their house. He also reminded her that she was the one who left him that time. Leaving his room, Zhou saw Bing Bing standing in the doorway. The girl looked a little embarrassed and asked Zhao if they could switch places. Zhou agreed, and they left together. After a while, they arrived at a small lake. There was a fishery there far from the nearest settlement. Bing Bing commented that because of that, there were probably few fishermen in the area, and asked who opened the farm. Zhao replied that the place belonged to the same guy, Lin Ji, and added that he had found it by accident. The girl became interested in why Lin Ji despised Zhou. Zhao said it all started in high school, when he refused to obey someone just because of their family's money. Later, Zhou began talking more with Layla, and Lin Ji tried to show off in front of her to win her over. Bing Bing said that Lin Ji didn't even like Layla, since he often insulted her in public. Zhao said that Lin Ji's only goal was to get revenge on him, and that Layla was free to be with whoever she wanted. Despite rumors about marriage between the two, Zhou said it was the adults who planned it, since they talked often without ever asking the two of them. The girl finally understood everything, although she still didn't grasp how that kind of love could lead to marriage. Suddenly, she sensed something, but there were no signs of danger in the water. They were in a garage, and there was a large underground storage area. However, the passage's defenses were very high, like a bank. The girl asked Zhu what they should do next. Zhao replied that they should try their luck anyway, but in truth, in a past life, he had already been there hiding from zombies. He managed to survive for a long time with the supplies, but at the time, he arrived when the power was already out and barely managed to switch on the backup source in time to keep the food from spoiling. This time, there had been no power outage. Maybe something had changed because they had stopped the first wave of zombies, and there was a chance there were survivors there. Suddenly, he heard the girl scream and asked what happened. She replied that it was nothing, just a slip. Bing Bing said the fish heads looked really strange, and asked Zhou what kind of fish those were. Suddenly, one of the fish's pupils contracted and turned red like blood. Zhou lunged forward because he instantly realized those fish had turned into zombies. As soon as Zhou touched the fish, it struck him with a jet of water. The young man wasn't expecting such a strong and sudden attack, and the next second, he was thrown against the wall. From the monster's strength, Zhou immediately realized it was a second-tier zombie. Bing Bing stood in front of Zhou, ready to protect him, and asked what they should do now. Zhou shouted that they had to run, There was no way they could deal with the monster. But suddenly, there was a sound coming from the entrance. He was very surprised to see that the vault door had closed, and they were now trapped. Joe pulled a knife from his backpack and rushed to attack. Since there was no time to deal with the door, he had to handle the danger first. Bing Bing couldn't help and only watched the fight, hoping Zhao would succeed. The knife struck the fish's scales like it was hitting iron armor without cutting anything. There was no way to slice through those scales with brute force alone. The creature was completely covered in scales, but there had to be a weak spot. After analyzing it with his own eyes, Joe realized the zombie's weak point was the gills. Zhao rushed and appeared behind the zombie, then aimed the knife at the fish's weak spot. But suddenly, just as the blade got close, mutant worms appeared. They usually lived in the fish's gills and coexisted with the host, protecting it. In moments of danger, Zhao's attack failed, and the fish wasted no time striking back with its tail. In the next moment, Joe was flung to the side, sustaining injuries. The fish immediately moved in and tried to strike again with a blast of water. But Zhu grabbed an exposed power cable and paralyzed the zombie with a surge of static electricity. He was lucky the creature had no resistance to pure energy. It wasn't an easy fight. Joe smiled, realizing that even with everything different from his previous life, these weren't key events. It was clear someone had placed that mutant there on purpose. Bing Bing asked if Joe was okay, and he replied yes, and that they needed to get out of there quickly. Since the place wasn't safe, they tried turning the door handle, but it didn't budge under the girl's efforts. She was surprised to see the door wouldn't move at all, as if someone had locked it from the outside. Joe activated his powers and told Bing Bing to step back. In the next moment, he punched the door with all his strength. After the dust settled, they saw that the door was still intact. The door's material was as tough as a bank vault, and they were underground on top of it. It wouldn't be easy to open it by force. Zhao said that was the strongest blow he could manage at the moment, and apparently, there was no way to open it. Zhao was tired and added that he needed to rest for a bit. The girl told him to rest, and that she would check the place. Maybe there was another way out. Zhao was resting, sitting in a corner near a pile of rocks, when he opened his eyes and saw Bing Bing returning, discouraged. She hadn't found anything, even after searching every corner. Unfortunately, there was no other exit in that vault. The temperature in the storage room was around -18 degrees, and even if they endured the cold, sooner or later they'd run out of oxygen. There was no time to hesitate, and Zhu stood up, saying he'd try again. Suddenly, Joe noticed the orb the girl was holding. She asked if, by eating that, she would gain powers like his. Concerned, Zhu suddenly grabbed her hand and said it was far too dangerous. She wouldn't be able to use the ability consistently, and besides, the effect was limited. Bing Bing said that if they kept going like this, it'd die there. So she asked Zhu to let her take the risk, to take a chance and hope the awakened ability would let them escape. Receptivity is the capacity to awaken Bing Bing. In his past life, he didn't know if anything would change this time because of that guy's interference. Zhao asked if she was sure. He thought that since she had shown courage, he shouldn't be afraid either. Bing Bing said that in the past, she would have been scared, but now she was ready with him. It was already late afternoon, the sun was setting. Jack and Joe Ming were searching for the missing ones, but no one answered their calls. Suddenly, they heard a loud roar. Jack asked if zombies were afraid of the sun. Joe Ming said they only showed up at night, but clearly something was wrong. In the next moment, they heard Joe scream and ran in his direction. They didn't know that someone was listening to them from behind a tree. In his memories, Joe saw a destroyed city. The guy was on the roof of a collapsed building in a dream. A voice beside him woke him up and told him to snap out of it quickly. When he opened his eyes and looked to the right, he saw a girl with a rifle standing in front of him. That girl was Bing Bing. She ordered them to get up. She had a job for him. She had spotted 4 massive level 4 zombie dogs and 2 level 6 tigers. The guy said that because of them, many zombies would gather there in about 20 minutes, and that they needed to warn the others. Bing said there wouldn't be enough time, and that only if she dealt with a leader could they buy a little more time. The guy disagreed and said that, as captain, it made no sense for her to stay there. The girl said that Zhao's abilities hadn't awakened yet, and that his presence would only get in the way. The guy felt sad because, even after consuming the zombie core, his abilities still hadn't awakened. Reluctantly, the guy told the girl that she just needed to survive. The girl smiled and nodded to him, and the rays of sunlight lit up her beautiful face. Suddenly, the guy woke from his sleep. The girl had woken him up. He noticed something was wrong with her and asked why she was on fire. Even Bing Bing didn't understand what was happening, but it was hard to breathe. She was sweating a lot and felt her whole body burning. The girl couldn't bear the heat anymore. Zhao asked her to wait a moment. He brought some ice and told her to stop taking off her clothes. She replied that she couldn't and asked him not to look. The guy said he wasn't looking and turned around immediately. After a while, he asked how she was feeling. Bing Bing said she felt much better the next moment. She added that she saw zombies, a lot of them. Joe told her not to panic, because that was her ability. The guy had been convinced that he had no influence on anything, since the girl already had this power in a past life. The girl said she could see a bunch of zombies below them. Zhao was surprised by what he heard, since he didn't know there was anything below. After searching a bit and moving some shelves, they found the secret passage leading down. There was indeed a staircase going underground. As they descended, the girl asked what that smell was. In that hallway, Joe said it was the smell of sulfur and that Lin Ji's family had used the fishery as a front to store gunpowder illegally. It wasn't surprising that all the doors and equipment were still working. Apparently, a lot of money had been invested there. Suddenly, they heard the groans of zombies wandering aimlessly through the room. Zhao said it was very dark in there and that he was counting on the girl. She was surprised by the statement. The guy grabbed a knife and encouraged Bing Bing, saying they could do it. The girl, after hearing him, activated her ability and became serious. She indicated the zombies' positions and the guy, at that moment, took them down, clearing the path. And so, they kept advancing and neutralizing every zombie that appeared. Finally, after some time, they reached a locked room and entered. There were many boxes, and the girl asked what they should do now that they had reached a dead end. After looking around, Joe said that if they swam through there, they'd come out directly in the lake outside. So they blew powder through the pipe into the lake's waters. Bing Bing was very happy they could finally get out. Suddenly, a massive zombie fish appeared next to the girl and grabbed her. Joe grabbed the girl's hand and tried to pull her out of the monster's mouth. But despite all his effort, water wasn't his element. In the end, the grip's strength grew weaker, and the fish carried the girl away in its mouth. Joe saw Bing Bing being taken again and couldn't let that happen another time. This time, he wasn't going to leave her alone. The young man activated his ability, and algae began to rise from the bottom. They wrapped around the fish from all directions, but the monster resisted. The girl was running out of air, but she saw Joe trying to save her. The last thing she saw was Joe reaching his hand out to her. Sometime later, at the surface, the girl opened her eyes. She sat up abruptly and shouted Zhao's name. He turned and was glad she had woken up. At that moment, he had just heated some canned food because he needed to eat and recover his energy. The girl thanked him and asked what had happened to the fish. Zhao replied that it had probably become food for the other mutants. He added that she had been harder to deal with than the monster in the storage room. However, it was likely those mutant fish had already spread and that they'd run into them again in the future. Bing Bing said that, back at university, Joe was quiet, and she thought it would be hard to get along with him. But since the zombie invasion, he had already saved her more than once. The girl got a little embarrassed and asked why he was so kind to her. Zhao was honest and said he saved her first because of her ability, because she could help him protect his family. The girl was a little upset but grateful for his honesty. Bing Bing asked why he had saved her this time. Zhao stayed silent for a long time, unsure of what to say. And just as he began to speak, the girl interrupted him and turned away, asking when they would return. Zhao said they needed to leave now and that, thanks to her ability, they could avoid confrontations with zombies. Finally, in the middle of the night, they returned home. His little sister ran up and hugged him. She had been very worried about him. Zhao saw how concerned the girl was and asked what had happened while he was gone. Zhao stayed quiet, then suggested they go inside first. A man was sitting in a chair. He had been infected by the virus and was trying to resist. Zhao was shocked and asked how it had happened. Zhao said that when they went looking for them, they found zombies lurking along the way. He had wanted to find a level 2 cord to save Uncle Nell, but he failed. The uncle asked if there was anything else that could be done, but it was already too late. The virus had reached his brain, and if they gave him a core, he would simply turn into a monster like Lin Ji. Zhao struggled to speak, but it was clear that he didn't want to become a zombie. He shouted for Zhou not to hesitate and to decide quickly. Zhao realized there was no choice and that he would have to neutralize him. Suddenly, he remembered something and saw that there was still hope. He turned and asked Olivia, his mother, to come with him. He pulled out the core of a zombie fish and told her to eat it quickly. The woman asked where he got that from, and Zhou replied that he got it on a mission. He rushed her to eat the core immediately. The mother said she wasn't infected and didn't understand why her son was asking this. At that moment, he heard a roar, and Zhou Ming said he couldn't hold the uncle much longer. Zhou understood he had to act fast before his mother's ability awakened. Right then, the zombie broke the ropes and freed himself from the restraints. He begged Zhou to kill him quickly, before it was too late. Mentally, Zhou apologized to his brother Huang and prepared to strike. The zombie was also ready and didn't resist any longer. At that moment, Olivia activated her ability. She immediately used her power and healed the zombie. Zhao became human again. He was overjoyed. Everyone was surprised that Olivia had suddenly awakened her ability, and even more shocked that she had rejuvenated by many years. The girl didn't understand why everyone was looking at her that way. After some explanation from Zhu, everyone understood where Olivia's power came from. Zhou Ying was delighted because thanks to this new ability, her mother had become a true beauty. She asked if she could now turn all zombies back into normal people. But Zhao explained that this ability only healed those who hadn't fully transformed yet, and regular zombies would simply die. Jack was thrilled, because now they didn't need to fear infection anymore. His wife could save everyone. Olivia asked her son how he knew she would have that ability. Zhao couldn't explain. He just said he suddenly felt that it would be her with that exact power. Besides, it was the same with his brothers and sisters' powers too, though back then the feeling hadn't been as strong. Even though the young man couldn't sense Bing Bing's power, he also couldn't copy it. Maybe he could only copy his family's powers, and when they awakened abilities, Zhu grew stronger too. Some time later, Bing Bing and Zhu were in the living room. Zhao asked the girl to find out how many zombies were in the area. She agreed and activated her ability, scanning the surroundings. She said there were about 100 zombies in the forest and the same number at the mountain's base. Zhao asked if there were were any level 2 zombies among them. The girl nodded and said there were at least 3. Suddenly, Bing Bing noticed that all the zombies had started moving at the same time. It was as if they were gathering in one place, like someone was calling them. Suddenly, the girl screamed when she saw Lin Ji. All the zombies were heading in his direction. Zhao saw with his own eyes as he was torn apart and doubted the girl had really seen him. If it really was Lin, then he was the one who locked them in the vault, and attacking Zhu and the others was all part of his plan. Bing Bing asked what they should do next, maybe warn the others to stay alert. Zhao said that Lin was probably gathering a horde of zombies to attack them, but instead of waiting for the attack, they would strike first, to catch him by surprise. Zhao, swinging a flashlight, looked around the forest, saying he was certain about his old friend. The old friend hadn't been seen for a long time, but he understood he couldn't stop searching, and suddenly, a male voice emerged. It was him, Lin Ji, the same one who had been torn apart. At their last encounter, with a demonic smile, he mocked the hero and was surprised that Zhao had come just to die. His words had a strong impact. The monster slayer arrogantly replied that he almost died last time. You could see how angry he was, shouting for him to shut up. And before even a second passed, he charged at his old friend. Zhu blinded him with the flashlight and didn't even think about dodging. But Lin Ji wasn't to be underestimated. During that time, he had gained a lot of strength and could easily pierce Zhao's throat. But our hero wasn't foolish enough to fall for such an obvious strike. He could literally see every movement he made. The whistle of the blade leading the sheath sliced through the air, and the undead fan was shredded. A new, gigantic wound appeared on his body, a massive cut along his side where air passed through easily. As Lin Ji's blood dripped down the blade, the hero realized something. Or rather, he already suspected it, because despite the heavy bleeding, the wound began healing before his eyes at an incredible speed. The hero noticed this and started commenting that there were no wounds on his body. What a coward he was. In response, the undead said Zhou was far too arrogant. After all, no matter how much he injured him, Zhu was alone. Then, behind the monster, a powerful explosion echoed, which left him confused and shaken. But Zhou had no idea that Lin Ji had his own army. Only today would the old enemy celebrate the day of Zhou's death. Meanwhile, in the direction of the explosion, a huge cloud of smoke spread, and the fire lit up the crater. The explosion had been truly powerful, creating a giant blaze that launched smoke into the sky. In the middle of the flames lay the smoldering corpse of a dead man, carried off by the wind, finally leaving this world. The cause of the explosion was none other than Zhou's amazing father, mocking those monsters who didn't even see it coming. Now the big guy felt immense joy in incinerating zombies. Well, no wonder he was laughing like crazy, but that laughter made him lose all sense, forgetting he was on top of a tree. The moment he stepped forward, he fell out of it. You wouldn't wish such stupidity on even your enemy, but Mom arrived just in time and caught the giant man. What strength! Jack was incredibly happy with his beloved wife. He was practically glowing before her, but she wasn't even a little pleased about that mountain of muscle falling on top of her just then. What an incredible family. And zombies don't sleep. Did they crash into a nighttime battle? Olivia understood there was no time to hug her husband. She had to fight the terrible horde. Our Ice Queen looked terrifying with that gaze. She literally froze the audience's hearts with her stare, and suddenly a blue star shone above their heads, which was not a good sign for the enemies. After the grand attack, they burned under blue flames. Their pain was indescribable, as if they were melting alive. Suddenly, the first strike was followed by another wave of blue energy that burned everything in its path. The magnificent mother was fully aware of the new power, which exceeded all her expectations after such beautiful strikes against the zombies. The hubby only loved her even more after that. Our queen remained as cold as ice. After clearing one of the dead zones, a signal came from Olivia, who asked Bing Bing where they should go next. She immediately replied that they should head northwest, about 1 kilometer away. There should be 24 zombies there. Then the mother asked what their status was. She replied that everything was fine. Everyone was in the basement, and there was a guard at the entrance. Then Bing Bing asked how brother Zhou Ming was doing, if he was holding up and how he was. He answered bluntly that those weaklings were never going to be enough to challenge him alone. The old man laughed and added over the radio that those zombies never dreamed the entire family would come after them. The brother said that the reason everything worked was because of their command center. Bing Bing, who kept them perfectly informed, coordinated their operations. Everyone agreed with Zhou Ming, and someone even suggested making her the squad commander. The heroine was flattered by all the compliments. Suddenly, something stunned her through her abilities. She looked over at the battle between Zhu and Lin Ji. It was not easy at all for the undead to fight the hero. He was literally being outmatched in everything. The boy looked down on his enemy with arrogance. A fire of confidence burned in his eyes, something Lin Ji could not replicate. He was shocked by everything he was seeing. It was written all over his face. He had never imagined so much power coming from Zhu. The corpse didn't want to die and lose again, so he screamed as loud as he could. There wasn't a single scratch on Zhu, while Lin Ji was bleeding and all his attacks were being repelled. Then Zhu asked if he still thought he had a chance to win with the snap of a finger. An incredible energy surged. As soon as he pulled the trigger, the end of the main antagonist would come. But the vile Lin Ji didn't see it that way. His terrible grin in the darkness of the forest said everything on its own. That grim smile was followed by a scream over the radio from Bing Bing. She warned that 3 second-class undead were approaching him. Immediately, 3 giant rats stood in front of him, blocking the path to Lin Ji. He was shocked by the sudden appearance of 2 second-class rat-type monsters, but he knew well they had no combat strength or experience at all. So the hero asked the enemy if he really thought he'd defeat him with a crowd of rats. Linji was clearly scheming something vile. That sinister smile revealed all of his intentions. Then the monster gave a strange answer. Linji said that the rats weren't meant for Joe, but for himself. The rats then lay down on the ground, and he asked the hero to take a closer look as he removed something from their bodies. He pulled out crystals, 3 of them, but it wasn't clear what they were for. It only took asking to learn that he ate the crystals to level up using the rat's power. At that exact moment, he transformed into a devil in the flesh. His grim smile grew even more terrifying. He had finally reached the 3rd stage of transformation. The night went on. The crescent blue moon bathed everything in pale light, even the peaks of the massive mountains piercing the sky. This creature had become even more dangerous. A level 3 mutant zombie was nothing like what it was before. Our hero thought the same. Realizing he was now facing a high-level zombie, he knew he had to strike with all his strength. With that thought, he didn't hesitate and immediately cloaked himself in blood-red energy. It only took a second for him to fly at full speed toward the devil. Eyes filled with power and rage, he saw his goal: to slice the monster down once and for all so it would never rise again. But all that momentum vanished the moment the monster grabbed his blade mid-flight. When Joe tried to bite his neck, the enemy didn't wait for him to make sense of what was happening and hurled him away. The blow left the boy unable to recover his senses, leaving him without hope for victory. Linji could already smell triumph over his enemy. His mocking smile was infuriating, and he believed Joe was only capable of what he'd shown so far. The hero himself never imagined he'd face his old friend in such a battle, where he once again found himself on the losing side. But the zombie slayer didn't despair and instantly decided to strike the monster again. While he wasn't expecting it, the monster remained completely silent, even disappointed by Joe's powers. Arrogant as he was, pretending to be everything he could. This was a true triumph for that vile creature. He was fully aware that all of Ju's abilities were depleted. After the demon grabbed his head, the hero felt incredible pressure and fear. Something had to be done. The monster decided to smash the helpless boy into the ground and shake the earth until he was buried. But the hero wasn't weak and used his last bit of strength to escape the enemy, and that truly surprised him. Linji didn't know where his sworn enemy had gone, but finding him now was like searching for a wolf dressed as a sheep among the flock. Yes, he didn't even consider panicking, as much as he wanted to. He said that he'd end Joe no matter what, and then go after his family. Meanwhile, the boy emerged from the inside of a tree through its roots, which he used to escape the monster. This power astonished him. He hadn't expected the might of a level 3 mutant zombie, since he'd never faced anyone like that in his past life. When he finally emerged completely, he said he feared he wouldn't be able to handle him, not even with help from his mother Olivia and his brother Zooming. He needed to think of something. The moment he thought of that, everything around him began to glow with bloody flames. He looked up, completely surprised. That light gave him no peace. The source of that terrifying glow was clearly visible. Behind the treetops, above his head, there was a full blood-red moon, which until recently had been just a crescent. It was clear to Zhu that a regular 3rd-tier zombie couldn't have done that. But who could? Then came an explosion of blue energy, impressive in strength and intensity. What is happening tonight? The energy spread rapidly in several directions, as if it had no end. That blue energy collided with someone. This battle caused explosions on a completely different scale of force. Something totally incomprehensible was happening in that forest, something that wasn't real. And in the middle of those domes of energy, 2 silhouettes, a woman and a man, floated in the air. Were they the ones responsible for all of this? But no one gave Zhao a chance to interfere in the battle of those 2 monsters of divine power, and the devil appeared behind him. The zombie slayer tried to react, to do something, but now he simply had to act, and the villain was furious, because he understood that the hero completely underestimated him. After those words, the demon launched the boy through the air with his rat-like tail, making the air tremble. He broke all the trees in the way. The impact was shocking. At that speed, Zhu destroyed the massive rock that had stood there for thousands of years. If the monster landed a few more tail strikes like that, nothing would remain of the local landscape. With great effort, Joe managed to break free from inside the rock. He had literally been buried alive in it. A few moments later, Ninja approached the hero, poking his forehead with a finger, and asked why he hadn't used his abilities to escape. "Well, if you can't escape, then you'll just die here," said the wicked demon. Suddenly, his words were followed by an explosion from the divine monsters that had been fighting until then. There were too many variables in that forest. At that moment, something inexplicable happened. The boy had the sensation that time had frozen. Everything was frozen. No one could move. If they could, he'd be dead. He realized he couldn't move, but his abilities were completely under his control. As soon as he realized that, Joe began concentrating energy in his forehead to fire an unbelievable beam of power. That beam shot from his forehead and pierced the evil ninja. He never imagined something like that would happen. But those deities were clearly on his side at the most inconvenient moment. It seemed they had frozen everything on purpose, and immediately, everything dissipated. Time resumed flowing. As soon as the monster realized something had gone wrong, and that Joe had hurt him, he felt a terrible pain. His eye vanished, and that was an unbearable burden for him. Linji was definitely haunted by a curse that still wouldn't leave him alone. After that battle, the scumbag fled deep into the forest. We won't see him for a while. His strength was leaving him. His eyelids grew heavy. His mind was fading. And at that moment, time stopped. just for him. The last bit of energy keeping him on his feet stopped working, and he collapsed while brother Joe Main was trying to call out to him. The boy was very worried about Joe. He wanted to know if he could get up, if he was safe, how he was feeling. But Joe didn't care about his own well-being. The hero wanted only one thing, to reach that monster, Lin Ji, and everything else. Because the world was changing entirely, those deities whose powers are hard to imagine, they need to be reached. And once again, he was plunged into the memories of one of his past lives, a superhuman, chosen by the gods. They were there so that ordinary people would become their slaves. Finally, Zhao escaped from that terrible memory. At that moment, he arrived at a place where a strange glow lit the night. He was sure it was connected to those who possessed abilities. Brother Zhao didn't remember well who had gained special powers, but those who reached higher stages were still scum. The hero deeply wanted to understand what was happening there, and he noticed a mysterious crater. In the center of it, something was glowing. A massive flow of energy emerged from nowhere. Looking down, he grew fascinated by what he saw inside the crater. It was clear that forest was no ordinary place. He thought that the crystal was to blame for the crater's formation. It radiated too much energy. When the hero fully examined the crystal, he was overcome with horror. A drop of fear ran down his cheek, and everything around was swallowed in darkness. He was overtaken by a strange desire to devour it. It drew him in irresistibly. He didn't understand anything. Suddenly, someone touched his hand and ordered him to leave. What kind of wanderer was that? Was he the one responsible for those energy explosions from yesterday? In less than a second, the hero jumped out of the crater. That place was surrounded by mysteries that needed to be uncovered. The boy felt no fear. He acted calmly and skillfully used his abilities to escape the surprise attack in the middle of the darkness. Zhao asked the stranger who dared to attack him. An unknown silhouette walked at the bottom of the crater through a cloud of dust. He too was surprised by the visitor. He looked like an ordinary man, but the scar on his face was unforgettable. In fact, the man was surprised that Zhao had survived there. But Zhu was no weakling. In an instant, he placed his hand on the enemy's neck. The stranger was impressed by such a reaction. Then he noticed the potential in him that needed to be developed. That scarred man was truly strange. Finally, the hero demanded he let go of his hand and say who he was and what the hell he was doing there. The man with the scar heard him, raised his hands, and said fine. He would introduce himself. He stood tall, placed his left hand on his chest, and introduced himself. His name was Gao Qiaobei. This hero knew how to surprise. As unexpectedly as he had appeared, he said he had rank 3 abilities. Immediately after that, a powerful strike came from the boy, his fist charged with incredible strength and energy. It was clear from his expression that he was not pleased by the attack from his uninvited guest. As the punch neared the man's face, the enemy disintegrated into atoms, and once again, our teleporter escaped his grasp. The powerful impact was followed by a massive wave of particles. This truth was incredible. In an instant, the particles began to regroup, reforming the stranger. As he explained in his own words, he had only been believed he knew what kind of crystal it was. He was there for a reason. Moreover, he understood that Zhao had only recently acquired his special ability. Zhao had no answer for that. Silence reigned in the forest. Only the warm breeze stirred his hair. He compared that crystal to a full-power feeder. Like in computer games, the scared man astonished him with his knowledge of ability users. They needed to level up, and that's exactly why they killed zombies and absorbed their cores. But doing so, he said, only allows one to reach the 4th stage of skill development, said Zhao Qiaobei. Then he handed over a piece of the crystal core. Zhao stared at it for a long time, unable to look away. Then he began to wonder why he had been given that, as if there were another motive. What did he want in return? And you're smart, that's right. In the future, I'll need your help, but for now, you better raise your rank, said Zhao Qiaobei. And finally, as his body disintegrated into particles, he said that gods still exist in this world, and they are real. Then he disappeared, followed by the massive crystal, which shattered into countless particles and vanished as well. The wanderer's last sentence shook the hero deeply. He was confused. What gods? What was he talking about? Was he delirious? Zhao was full of questions. Now he was completely alone again, with those craters and the whistling wind. He still couldn't shake off those words. He looked at the ground and tried to imagine the gods who had been mentioned more than once. He thought he must be going completely insane. What goes on in these bastards' minds? What kind of deities actually exist in our world? Perplexed, Zhao wondered. Almost the same thing had been said by that bastard who awakened his abilities. A new milestone for humanity, the peak of evolution. So if these were gods, then the end of the world was somehow connected to them. This encounter only raised more questions. After much thinking, a blue energy began to rise beneath his feet. Maybe an enemy attack? Or a new ability? This glow intensified as if thousands of floodlights were burning in front of him, blinding him. Thunderbolts roared all around. An incredible surge of energy came out of nowhere. A strange sphere appeared before his eyes. A cluster of power that emitted far too much light, like a spherical bolt. A strange crystal floated in the sky. Could it be that it had come from the core Gao Qiaobei took? Once again, something Joe didn't understand. He couldn't even imagine why that sphere had appeared there. That crystal chose our hero, flying toward him almost at lightning speed. As soon as it found him, the little stone shot straight into the boy's chest with a whistle. He didn't even dare to hope something like this would happen to him. After that, he was completely engulfed in flames. Power, strength, and energy dominated him. Could it be that he himself was about to become a deity? Then he shot into the sky. A huge whirlwind formed around him. The ground spun in a dance with other debris. Help had arrived for the hero. Lena and Zhou Ming ran to find their arrogant brother. Maybe they could work miracles. As soon as they got there, everything was shrouded in mystery, starting to lose hope that the girl would stop talking nonsense, saying that they couldn't just make ghosts appear there. But the figure, surrounded by a blue aura, was approaching them. He didn't even take a single step to the side. He came straight toward them. Zhao Ming was even more frightened. She had already realized this might happen. They needed to run, but her brother stood his ground. Even so, that aura kept drawing closer. It didn't respond to shouts, but also didn't stop moving through that fog. Suddenly, the figure began to blur. Zhao Ming tried with all her might to scream for her brother, but he had nothing to say. As soon as the figure disappeared into the ground nearby, a massive bolt of lightning struck, as if many thunderclaps fell at the same spot. The girl no longer had any answers. She hoped Brother Ming knew the reason and asked him. He himself didn't know much about this world, but he said that here, giant explosions happen, and you could get close to them. Finally, he told her to go home, and that he would go check out the explosion himself. But Zhou Ming didn't want to go anywhere. Ming told her to obey him, but the stubborn girl refused to tolerate that in any way. You could see on her face that she wouldn't just stand there. It was no surprise when she began using her abilities as expected. She used her powers to manipulate the tree roots. Then she climbed onto the roots and told Ming to slow down. The boy immediately realized something was wrong when he saw that Zhou Ming was chasing him toward the explosion, and so they arrived just in time. The girl also arrived spectacularly, though her landing wasn't smooth at all. Still, he asked her to go back, but she disobeyed and followed him. She had a reason for it. After all, that place was dangerous. The more people, the better. They didn't have time. Noticed that Zhao had opened his eyes and was clearly overjoyed. Turns out our hero had been lying in bed for a whole day, scaring everyone nearly to death. They scolded him for pushing so far without being recovered. He desperately wanted to figure out what had happened, how he ended up there. There were so many questions and no answers. His sister replied that they should be asking him how he got absorbed by the light and ended up in that giant sphere. And once again, that glow returned to his eyes. Even so, he understood nothing. And then came more news. As soon as he looked at Zhu Ying, he knew literally everything about her. All of her abilities, her development stage, what power she had, even how much was left for her next stage. He was intrigued by the fact that when looking at his loved ones, he saw strange flags with their abilities. He decided to touch them and discovered what was happening, why he could see all their powers. When he looked at his mother, he saw her abilities, her age, how many crystal cores she needed for the next stage. He saw the same as his brother. It was clear he didn't understand this behavior. If we believe the data from his eyes, then higher stages require high-tier cores. But if you don't have them, then nothing is known. Even though he had a crystal core now, he couldn't use it at the moment. From time to time, he faced the harsh truth. He would need to grow stronger because they were coming soon. Suddenly, his father approached the bed and told the boy to get up already. But this brother didn't even notice his father was doing something to him. "What's going on?" Joe asked. But his father, Jack, was tired of seeing his son daydreaming. He had just woken up and still looked like he was asleep, and there were his father's abilities which hadn't even awakened yet. As it turned out, he had a high chance of awakening Disney. Finally, he got up and said whatever, but deep down in his soul, he was pleasantly surprised to have seen abilities not yet awakened. The protagonist was clearly out of sorts, like he'd woken up on the wrong side of the bed. Then Zhu Ying asked where he was going. He reluctantly replied that he was going to Gao Kia Bayar. He left, but the others couldn't say a word. No one was pleased with his behavior. His sister didn't understand why she had waited so eagerly for him to wake up. Ming understood that Brother Zhou seemed to have been reflecting on something for a long time, so he shouldn't be disturbed. Meanwhile, Zhu Ying was carrying a plate full of all kinds of snacks. It was obvious she was happy that her dear Zhao had woken up, but she had just finished preparing dinner. What a coincidence. The hero was starving like a wolf and would be thrilled with a homemade meal. Those two were happy just watching that couple chat peacefully at Gao Kiao Bei's place. But the truth was, the moment they turned away, Zhou was already by his beloved Zhu Ying's side, and their father noticed that his son was worried about not having a girlfriend. While his brother and the girl were having fun, Zhu Ying also added that Ming often brought friends, but never girls. Meanwhile, Zhao had already eaten, and only crumbs were left on his plate. Then he asked his psychic friend if she had seen Lin Ji, or how far he could be. She answered that she hadn't seen the enemy in a long time, especially since Ming had also gone out to look for him, but with no success. Then the heroine noticed again that Zhao was thinking about something. She was bothered by the somber look on his face, and finally he asked that question. Why was he so gloomy? That wasn't good at all. Well, he didn't seem like himself, so she remembered when they were attacked by zombies. Everyone was in total terror, but he remained calm in those moments. It seemed like he could overcome any obstacle, reach any height, literally capable of anything. And even if the enemy of any strength stood right in front of him, the boy would take care of it all. So sweet. She sincerely told him he could share anything that was bothering him. After all, they were one big family. Zhao was very moved by her words, especially because she included herself in his family. That called for a moment of silence before the great embarrassment. Then she realized she had said more than enough and started trying to backpedal from her words. But her fluster didn't let her. She and Zhu were so close. Or maybe not. She said it with a face full of embarrassment. The protagonist understood everything perfectly and was happy with all her words. No matter what she said to him, he would always understand her. However, he also knew that those out on the balcony had been watching the couple the whole time, and they needed to talk. That left them quite intrigued. The trio didn't say a word. They just looked at each other. Time passed, and everyone headed somewhere. While they traveled, he told everyone they should collect zombie cores and absorb them to increase their ability stages. Throughout that time, he thought about how they could become stronger. He wanted to tell her something, but his heart didn't allow it. Olivia wasn't calm about the situation at all. She didn't like what was happening there, and all because in times of peace, everyone could live in harmony. But after the end of the world, human nature took over. Sometimes people trying to survive do things worse than any zombie. That's what makes us animals, said the woman. For those reasons, they needed to become stronger, more dangerous than anyone else. The threat must become more terrifying than any nightmare. They needed to gather resources, improve their development stage, and expand their weapons stockpile. Behind all of it was the well-being of his family. Jack valued his son's words. He was right, the old man said. Then he continued. Anyone who dares attack them would have to choke on their own blood. Time passed, and they stopped to examine the place they had been so eagerly trying to reach. The father asked if that was the water plant Chow had talked about, and if there was gunpowder there. The hero confirmed with his words and said he might find something even more important there. Then a powerful explosion rocked the middle of the forest. What was going on, and why was there activity right when they arrived? Upon arrival, Zhu didn't expect anything like that to happen. At the explosion site, a huge dust cloud lingered. Inside it, silhouettes of many people were moving. These strangers revealed themselves to be bandits, armed or soldiers. One by one, they advanced through the structure toward the water station. They weren't the only ones heading there. Zhao also noticed them, but was surprised by the number. In fact, their numbers were impressive. Ming had no idea where they came from or what exactly they were after there, or what the purpose of such a large-scale operation could be, so the protagonist suggested they might be Lin Ji's accomplices, involved in gunpowder trading, and all signs pointed to them being after the same thing as their family. His words shocked them. What did that mean? That they would be left without supplies and the bandits would take everything? He said that before leaving that place last time, they had locked the doors, but they didn't hesitate to use grenades to get in, which meant they knew exactly what was there, and not everyone had that information. His sister was immediately shaken, because she understood they had lost many resources, and that Lin Ji's bandits would take everything. Zhao didn't see it that way, lowering his head. He said it wasn't certain they would take everything. Zhou Ying initially thought about fighting back, but there was a problem. They had weapons on their side, so Zhu turned to Zhou Ying. What did he want from her? As it turned out, he wanted to know how many zombies were near the reservoir. She accepted the request and used her ability, which made her eyes glow with golden flames. From above, she could see how many red dots wandered through the forest. They were all zombies, but there were too many zombies. In total, there were 52, of which 45 were common, and the rest were second tier. But that wasn't all. Among all the monsters, there was one unlike any other, much larger and stronger, and on top of that, with some kind of dark substance on its head. Except for Zhu, no one in the family had ever faced a third-tier monster. According to Brother Zhu, the entire underground area was full of gunpowder, which made it difficult to shoot at the zombies, let alone at third-tier creatures. The plan was to wait until the bandits engaged the zombies in battle, and only then would they make their move. Zhou Ying agreed with her brother, but Ming surprised everyone by saying it seemed like someone was approaching. His words made our boy uneasy. He immediately looked to the side and sensed it too. Suddenly, beyond the horizon, silhouettes of people began to appear, like silent shadows unexpectedly infiltrating. They were the same armed bandits. That large group was only part of the full team. Immediately after Zhu, the order came to take cover behind some cover. Emergency situation. Fortunately, he and his brother managed to hide behind the car as they were hit by a hail of bullets. The hero told his brother they would have to split up to win and run in different directions. Ming said he would draw the enemy in and his brother would strike at the right time. Do everything quickly. The enemy would show no mercy. He focused all his energy and ran after Ming. Both had an important mission. The fighter clearly hadn't expected this at first. He didn't even know who to shoot, to the left or to the right, and it was because of this mistake that he paid the price. While he was shooting at Ming, Ming danced through the hail of bullets and dodged every one. Now he realized he didn't belong there anymore and decided to jump off the bridge to get away from the forest. But he didn't expect danger to be waiting there too. Zhao was right on his heels as he tried to react. It only took a few moments for the enemy to be defeated. One touch, and the mask cracked under the pressure of his hand. That move sent the soldier spinning like a top, and his weapon flew far away. The enemy was defeated. They had managed to beat him. But why was it just one? Where were his companions? He stared for a long time at the bold one who had come alone to face ability users. And now he was defeated, despite everything. That soldier would have to be thoroughly interrogated, Joe said. But suddenly, Ming shouted to his brother that he needed to run. A new danger was approaching. Was that fighter just a decoy? Then a series of massive explosions occurred beneath their feet. They never expected a battle like this. There were deep dents in the tree trunks, as if they'd been struck by an ancient cannon with a powerful shot. There were also cylindrical holes in the ground, as if a massive rock had rolled through there. Almost nothing remained of the soldier. Too bad, they could no longer interrogate him. The protagonist understood absolutely nothing about what was happening there. There was always something strange in their path. But the cause of those explosions, the dents in the trees and holes in the ground, was that seemingly harmless ball. Ming said that it was part of an ability, and that they needed to be careful with it. No matter how resistant the ability user was, they wouldn't survive a direct hit. One of the balls managed to hit Cho, causing only a minor scratch. Brother Ming wondered if something had happened to Ju or not. He replied that he was fine, just a scratch on the hand. It would heal before the wedding. Then he asked if Ming saw where the attack came from. Zhao replied that all the projectiles had come from different directions, and that on top of that, the stranger was firing them from a considerable distance. This left Cho stunned. How was that fired? From that far away? How is this possible, he asked. Using a pinball machine as an analogy, Ming clearly explained how the enemy's attack worked. Someone would shoot the balls, and they would become the targets. And again, one rose and appeared, a sign of a new offensive, and this time nothing unexpected. They were once again surrounded by a rain of countless attacks, many capsules flying straight toward them, which only spread panic. During that battle, Joe realized a truth. Wherever they hid, the enemy would find them. It was only a matter of time. Likewise, he determined that they really were firing from long range, so it wouldn't be easy to get close. But if they could always find them, then they could always figure out where the enemy was. The hero impressively realized that someone had been spying on them from under the bushes for a long time. That silhouette would be hard to miss now. As it turned out, it was an ordinary zombie, which could certainly provide information to its masters. Not even a second passed before the bloodthirsty monster was taken down by the hands of a zombie slayer. Taking his time, he separated the monster's head, whose skull was already cracked under its animal instincts. The boy looked arrogantly at the zombies, and his mind filled with various thoughts. He wanted to figure out what to do with the enemy at such a distance. Meanwhile, Ming noticed that the bombing had started. It couldn't be that this zombie was the leader of the others, so the danger still remained. They had to stay alert. He realized he might be right, since the real enemy could be using that zombie for spying. His brother suggested there could be two enemies, but in reality, there might be more. Suddenly, from the side of the road came the scream of Zhu Ying, who called her brothers to hurry back, all because the armed men from the warehouse had started to move and might notice them. Ming was shocked at how fast time had passed. They already needed to rush. Chao wasn't far from the youngest, and he was also surprised by the speed of those bandits. The brothers agreed and went to the car to discuss a plan of action. After all, they couldn't act randomly. Meanwhile, the same enemies who had fired bullets at the heroes were now furious for letting them get away. One of the villains blamed his partner Fatty. It was his fault they lost them, and they were about to take a big risk, while their comrades scolded him. Fatty was painting his lips and fixing himself up, saying those handsome guys were clearly very strong. The races had so easily stopped their attack. Besides, the lipstick-wearing devil didn't look like a villain at all. He looked more like a little kid who had gotten into his mother's makeup. But none of that really mattered. Nai wondered why his companion had killed that guy. He replied they could just blame those two, and that the death of a civilian wouldn't have any consequences. While they argued, poking each other with lipsticks and cigarette tips, an old man ordered them to stop with that nonsense. It was the one with 4 eyes, who showed them the gate was open and they could begin. Then we were taken to the Zhou family's house. That's where they decided to discuss everything that had happened. Everyone understood that no one was following them. There were no signs of surveillance. They weren't even in the car. Zhao Yang said they would shoot directly at them, without missing a single shot. She asked if it was possible that X could also be hit there. At the same time, the hero leaned on the table and thought for a long time. He couldn't even imagine how all that had happened. Now they wouldn't be able to attack them all because they'd be busy extracting resources. That was their main goal while they were safe. But as soon as the bandits saw the safe, he would immediately come after the hero and his family. That terrified them. How much time would they have to escape? How much time would they need to become stronger? The girls were also frightened, because with that much gunpowder, the bandits could turn the whole village into ruins. Even the smart girl, Zhu Ying, was shocked by Zhao's words. Not even he knew how bad the situation really was. Then Zhou Ying remembered how her brother had said that all the gunpowder was underground, which meant they couldn't shoot. And besides that, there was a third-level creature down there. It wouldn't be easy at all for them. Even with all that confidence, she was still very worried, since they had already managed to kill all the zombies in the reservoir. Later, Ming added that there were no cars nearby, but among the military, There might be ability users who didn't even need weapons to defeat the zombies. That's when Zhou Ying asked what they should do, but Olivia and Jack were ready to offer their lives. If the enemy was targeting his family, all they had to do was come closer, and they would witness the fury of their mighty father. He immediately asked his daughter to help him make gunpowder weapons, and to prepare the gunpowder herself. She didn't even think of refusing. Now Zhou's mind wasn't clouded with dark thoughts. He kept thinking about how in a past life, the village had been discovered a few months later, and now not even a few weeks had passed. Besides, those soldiers were very well trained, which could be seen from their equipment and movements. They could also absorb second-level zombie cores and become stronger. Even so, they couldn't just sit and wait, and attacking now was far too risky. There were too many contradictions for just one Zhou. Then suddenly, there was a touch. It was Zhou Ying's hand. At that moment, she acted like a sedative. She told Zhou that he should trust his loved ones and family, and not rely only on himself. That was too selfish. As sudden as the touch came, the radio behind him crackled. Something important had happened, and people were trying to alert everyone. The protagonist immediately listened and told the others. Everyone was incredibly happy with him. Apparently, there had been some sort of small incident. They managed to find a survivor. That guy lying on the ground looked familiar, as if we had seen him recently. Zhao shouted over the radio to tie him up first and wait for him there. Zhao asked why that was necessary, but the truth is, it would be hard to explain right away. It would take too long to explain everything to him. Once he arrived, Zhou would tell them all the important parts based on that information. He literally flew out of the house and told his family to stay home, that he'd be back soon. He immediately thought it could be one of the soldiers, and that wasn't a good sign for them. There was no way they could have found them so quickly. That's why he ordered them to tie the drifter up. They couldn't let him leave. He came face to face again with his hated old flame, who seemed really happy to see him, and even said they had gone to the hospital. He calmly told her that she looked younger and didn't even pay much attention, just like they had always done. That was her true face, acting cute in front of those she needed, and when something didn't please her, a terrible expression would appear. But that didn't matter. Zhou needed to hurry to see that survivor and find out more about him. Chao was standing with batons in hand, waiting for the main zombie killer to check out the stranger outside. He didn't look anything like the armed thugs who had seized the reservoir. They also noticed that the stranger looked nothing like them. He seemed like someone entirely different, just someone. As soon as he raised his head, a scar appeared on his face. A very familiar scar. Could it really be him? Yes, it was our friend Gao Qiaobei, the same guy who talked about improvements using crystal cores and how he reached the third development stage. Suddenly he opened his eyes. It was obvious from his look that he was extremely frightened. A woman's scream echoed throughout the block, asking what that bastard had done and who he had attacked. Those ropes meant nothing to Gao Qiaobei. In a second, he freed himself from captivity. Zhou tried to stop him. After all, they had met before, so he wouldn't dare run away. And in fact, he managed to capture her to keep Zhu in his place. Then came the threats. He would kill her if the hero took even one step closer. A friend of Zhu immediately shouted, trying to calm Gao Qiaobei down and convince him no one meant him harm. Of course, he didn't believe them and kept saying they wanted to kill him. If they tried, doctrine. Finally, he let Nika go and said he wanted to taste real food, or better yet, noodles. A plate of noodles. Gao Qiaobei looked like he had conquered Everest, found an oasis after days without water, like a cool breeze on a hot summer day. The others were very confused about the fact that a stranger was sitting at their table, happily devouring the noodles. Ming decided to confirm with his brother if it was really him whom they had found on the day of the great explosion. His sister thought he looked more like a ragged man who only knew how to eat, but that's just how he was. Then he asked his brother for more food. He was deeply embarrassed by the fact that this parasite named Zhu called him brother, but the hero decided to look at him with his new ability to see his stats, and at the same time realized that from that moment on, Gao Qiaobei had changed and didn't even remember him anymore, which was incredible. The scared man himself said he had been in the third stage of development, but now he was only at the first. He also realized that he lied, pretended not to know him, or claimed he had lost his memory. He couldn't make sense of any of it. Time passed, and Gao Qiaobei ate another plate of noodles with an incredible appetite. Then he thanked everyone for the dinner, because without them, he would have starved. He said he didn't care about gratitude, but he became curious if he wanted to say something, and that scared him a little. What to say? The scar repeated in a trembling voice. He leaned back on the couch and asked how the teleportation master had arrived in their village. What wind had brought him here? Gao Qiaobei was afraid they wouldn't believe him right away, but he told them he got there using teleportation. You could even say he escaped and ended up there, and that caught Zhou's attention. How did he escape? From the zombies or something like that? Zhou asked. Exactly. Those creatures were chasing me the whole time, so I had to resort to teleportation. But why are you all so calm, believing so easily in my words about the travel? This guy is from the city. He's not from here, but it does seem true, Zhou thought. For someone telling the truth, Gao Qiaobei seemed very insecure, as if he were afraid of being exposed. That's when his closest companions asked him how things were back there, if there were any military forces, and they said all the zombies should have been destroyed before even bringing the matter up. He stammered constantly, because it was incredibly hard to talk about. Everything in the city was really bad. As soon as the zombies appeared, panic spread through the streets. Some people were trampled by the crowd, others were run over by cars, and he was the only one who managed to hide in a dumpster, where he stayed for a long time hearing nothing but screams and more screams. There was still hope in his mind that someone would come get him and save him. But during all that time, the city was overrun by zombies. The police couldn't contain them. Many officers ended up becoming victims of the virus. Many people tried to defend themselves and fight off the bloodthirsty creatures, but died as heroes, fighting for themselves and for their loved ones. There were also those who took their own lives, without even trying to fight for their future. All those details didn't matter much to Brother Zhu. It was better to be direct and get to the point. Gao Qiaobei agreed with him. In the end, his nerves were already on edge. Staying alive felt like a luthier's prize, as if he had to live many lives to earn it. But then he handed the hero a phone with a message that said, if anyone wanted to be saved, they would have to hunt zombies and eat their crystal cores. The message also said that all who received abilities would become God's chosen ones, and that once again surprised the hero. He had received the message just 2 days after the end of the world. How could they have figured that out so fast? Could it be that this wasn't the first time someone like the hero had been in such a situation? Joe wondered. You couldn't say Ming was happy about it, but he understood that the city already knew about zombie core. Exactly, he considered them lucky since they were very rare. If only my comrades from the detachment had that kind of luck, said the scared man. Ming didn't pay attention to what kind of detachment that was or whether it represented danger to them. On the 3rd day of survival, Gao Qiaobei decided to join a detachment that back then had 100 people. Besides handling supplies, they often went out to hunt for crystals. You know for what purpose? After 5 days of hunting, they gathered the same amount of little stones, and then the strongest among them decided to be the first to try them. But among the 5, only the commander survived. The others died and he buried them using his ability. The commander then led them to fight against other groups for supplies. That's when they faced another ability user in battle, and a group fight broke out. As the battle intensified, more people had to awaken their abilities, and that's how Gao Qiaobei awakened his. Those who weren't as lucky turned into zombies and were killed. Those who received abilities kept on fighting. Life became more and more terrible, so the scared man got tired of staying there and ran away. The zombies chased him for a long time, but his ability was his salvation. Ming was intrigued by his words, because he understood that ability users were fighting each other over supplies, and his sister added that, after hearing all of that, she wanted to stay in the village. It was calmer here. Exactly, said the cheeky Gao Qiaobei, joking while sitting in the chair. It's calm and peaceful here. The zombies don't bother anyone and there's food. What could be more important? So that's it. I'll stay here. The others weren't happy at all with this new tenant, so the hero, desperate, lowered his eyes and said that things weren't that calm here either. He looked a bit down, and began to worry that this place wasn't as peaceful as he had imagined. At that very moment, Joe replied that things hadn't been peaceful lately, so he'd have to help too. Meanwhile, Zhu Ying was handling things and asked if they were done interrogating the man. Yes, the hero replied, and added that Gao Qiaobei would be staying there for a while and would help however he could. He scratched the back of his neck, thanked them for lunch and introduced himself. Hi, my name is Zhao Qiaobei. Everyone smiled at him and greeted the new tenant in unison. My name is Jack and I'm the oldest around here. I'm Olympia, the wife of the oldest. He bowed before everyone and thanked them again. Thank you, Sister Bing, Miss Olivia, and Uncle Jack. The heroine and the eldest were very surprised at how he addressed everyone there. But everyone got a new nickname. Then his sister, Zhu Yang, nudged him. She was the one who was surprised, finding it strange that someone in their 30s would call someone who was barely 20 uncle. That name? He was shocked. I mean, he's over 30. How is that possible? Our scared hero asked everyone. He just turned 18. He said that, and suddenly everyone went silent. But the truth is, how could he be 18 if Joe himself, with his vision, had seen that his age was at least 28? Zhou Ying was so shocked that she had never believed a man that old could be 18. But it couldn't be. So Gao Qiaobei, shaken by his appearance, fell to his knees and said maybe he looked a bit older than his age. But he wasn't lying to anyone. He stayed silent for a while. But even so, he said, okay, I believe you. Even though he had seen his real age, then the scared old man ran to him on his knees and said he seemed very cold and insensitive. He even thought there were a lot of problems with him. But in truth, behind that there was a gentle soul. Of course, the strange thing was that he had checked all his features himself, so they would need to go. He immediately asked where they were going. The hero started to wonder if he had really decided to test him, saying he'd find out later. He judged that entirely based on his behavior, and for that reason there were only two outcomes. Either something really happened to him, or he was also pretending. Well, suddenly, the hero was interrupted by his beloved Zhu Ying. who, very impatient, brought him something wrapped in cloth. He seemed pleasantly surprised that his beloved was bringing him a gift. There was some kind of weapon wrapped in the cloth, which he found and immediately realized would be better suited for Ju. So I brought it for you, and she immediately blushed. Oh, how she blushed. She was so embarrassed as she handed it over, clearly worried he might not like it, but even so she offered it. He simply couldn't refuse. That beautiful blade had been named after a strong swordsman. She probably thought her hero was just as grand. He, of course, thanked her and valued the blade. After all, it was a really good one. There was no way to express how happy she was about it. She was as happy as if it were her second birthday, as if she had reached the end of the rainbow. After receiving all the gifts, he said he would return soon to call him in case of danger. Time passed. The hero and the scared man were walking silently toward the same place, and Zhou Qiaobei suddenly asked about it. Zhao replied that he himself needed to discover that place. They were going to retrieve a crystal core near the mountains. He was shocked by that. Why was it so far away? Wasn't there another route? Zhou Qiaobei, the hero, didn't need anything if the teleportation master was always available to take them himself. As it turned out, he had never tried to move anyone besides himself. Well, for the young man, it was a great opportunity to try. He patted me on the shoulder and said, "Let's go." He couldn't refuse anymore and said he'd do it, since the other was trusting him so much. In a second, they disintegrated into several particles and vanished from the village. After the teleportation, they appeared on the rooftop of one of the tall buildings, which could be counted on one hand. Zhao was already standing on the rooftop, while Zhou Qiaobei was hanging from his arms. He was the only unlucky one. As soon as the effect of the ability wore off, old Zhou Qiaobei was left dangling from a great height and began screaming at the entire village. The hero immediately determined that they were north of the village. Meanwhile, the scared one asked to be pulled up onto the roof first. He didn't want to pay attention to his partner, but after analyzing it, he realized they had moved about 3 kilometers. It was still quite far, so Ju ordered his partner to continue. As it turns out, he was trying to test his abilities, so they would continue until his strength ran out. He didn't dare refuse and, with some effort, agreed to continue the test. The next teleportation was followed by a loud scream that woke every living creature in the forest. The hero asked him to stop screaming for no reason. The old man replied saying he had never tried teleporting continuously with someone else, but didn't care about the complaints and whining. They needed to hurry, and he had already said that many times. "Oh, come on," he said, then asked, "Won't you even give me time to rest?" And again he repeated, "There's not much time, so let's keep going." Well, he's not even human. The man was already nearly at his limit. He couldn't argue since he had no rights in that house. But some time passed, and they finally arrived at the place where the core was. With all the teleporting, he had spent all his physical strength and energy. Finally, he asked if they had arrived. The hero replied yes, they were there. From his analysis, he determined that his ability wasn't that good. Actually, it was bad. He didn't like such harsh criticism of his abilities. After all, the ability was very good. So he explained his words by saying the main strength of it was the precision control, and that was only possible within a 100-meter radius. Besides that, it consumed almost all of his physical energy, so he couldn't fight using teleportation for long. He laughed and said it wasn't that bad, that it was actually very good, so he was satisfied with the result. Suddenly, Joe shouted. He wanted the old man to stop acting like that. What happened was that, from the outside, he looked like a demon interrogating the dead to send them to hell. He told him to stop pretending. He was instantly frightened by his new companion, not understanding what he had done wrong. Zhao wasn't acting strangely. He had wanted from the beginning to separate him from the family to find out whether Zhou Qiaobei was pretending or not. He was clearly tired of seeing how that bastard had been acting ever since they had met before, and now he had gone to his family as if on purpose. He didn't understand what his new companion needed. How could they have met before if all this time they were just trying to survive? But no one there would listen to him, and there was no way to run. The furious hero was already attacking. Incredibly, the air around trembled with such force it literally sliced the wind. But Zhou Qiaobei managed to dodge the instantaneous attack, still not understanding a thing. Was he really serious about acting this way? The scared one wondered. Somehow he didn't act like a villain. Not like the same Zhou Qiaobei who suddenly stood between the hero and the crystal core. In front of him stood a completely normal person, nothing unusual, not showing his true strength. Who is he? What happened to him? Or maybe someone did this to him? Zhou wondered. Maybe. Then he recognized a completely different Zhou Qiaobei, someone else. Whether it was a second individual or someone else entirely. Suddenly, the scared man stopped and shouted for his brother to stop following him. Then he became truly frightening, exactly like that day. He said he was never afraid of fighting, especially against a boy. But this Zhou Qiaobei had started to scare him. He probably reminded him of that arrogant scared man. As he kept acting like a child, he decided to attack Zhou with an incredibly slow jump. But he didn't stand a chance. It only took a moment for the hero to completely dodge the attack. It was shameful even to win a fight like that. The old man threw himself face first to the ground and ended up losing. He had hoped for a good fight but decided to stay quiet because, well, he had nothing to say. This eccentric lay in a cloud of dust and didn't even think about getting up. Since he was in a lot of pain, the boy approached him and praised him for not running away like a coward, but for continuing to fight. No matter how weak he was, he would be of great help. The admirable Zhou Qiaobei finally stood up. saying he wasn't happy. They had been evaluating him for half a day and still didn't trust him. The old man had completely lost hope that he would survive, since the hero was acting as if he'd kill everything in his path. But the job wasn't done yet. Let's go back. We'll call the others. Because of a mission, time passed and everyone gathered. Nothing was visible in the forest due to the dark night. It turned out they had arrived at the reservoir to make up for lost time and prepared to fight again. The hero told his companions that everyone should act according to the plan they had discussed. First it would be himself, Brother Ming, and the scared old man, Gao Qiaobei, who would attack everyone. Olivia would stay with her sister Zhu Ying to keep constant communication. Meanwhile, the old man couldn't believe they were attacking right now, when everyone would be on high alert, but the hero spoke the truth. Those people would be willing to do anything because of those resources. Zhou immediately invited Gao Qiaobei to leave if he wanted to. He replied that he wasn't afraid, just worried about the others. Ming said they had already discussed everything. They couldn't turn back now, it was too late. Still, he was worried, but he almost refused. Everything would have gone against him. Then we were taken a few hours back in time before the current events. At that moment, Zhao had suggested they attack the depot at night, which his father didn't like. Now they wouldn't attack the enemy's front line. There was another plan. They would strike secretly from the weakest point. That surprised Jack, since his son used to charge into battle without thinking. But this time he had come up with something clever. This way, they could take all the necessary resources without drawing unwanted attention. Besides, the enemies couldn't attack them if there wasn't enough gunpowder, and they wouldn't be able to deal with that. Ming had just one doubt. How would they get in unnoticed with the increased security? Even if they got in, how would they get everything out? He agreed with his brother's words. After all, he was right. It wouldn't be easy, but if they came up with something, they could move mountains, and Gao Qiaobei would help them with that. With his incredible penetration ability, while everyone discussed the details of the plan, he was eating terrified, because he didn't want to fight anyone. Meanwhile, Zhou swore that under no circumstance would he allow anything to happen to the new partner. He was referring to Ming, and that he would always protect him. At that moment, Gao Qiaobei realized he was so worried, that he had agreed to everything too easily, and now regretted seeing his peaceful life gone. Let's get to the point. Zhou Ying handed Zhu a walkie-talkie, so they could communicate and call for help if needed. Right then, he asked if she could see with her own eyes what was happening at the reservoir. Doing this favor for her would never be a problem, especially not for Zhu. Upon observing, she noticed the warehouse was much calmer than expected. There was still the same third-tier creature and a bit of second-tier presence, truth after truth. He said the enemy had started to act, which meant they couldn't hesitate. After all, the future was on the line now. He entrusted Zhou Ying entirely to Mother Olivia, who promised to protect the girl even from the wind. With a mother like that, there was no need to worry. She said, "Go forward and don't wait for anything." The mother gave confidence to the trio, who quickly headed to the site of action. Meanwhile, there was only one armed guard at the entrance, who closely monitored any noise. Ying noticed there was no one nearby. Zhu assumed everyone was underground. They couldn't let their guard down for even a second, and asked his dear Zhu Ying where the zombies were. According to the report, the third-tier ones were in the southeast. The rest of the second-tier ones were right in the center. That was a great opportunity for them, because the northwest was completely clear and the bandits were busy with defense. After that, he told his brother that he and the scared man would go first, and that he himself should stay there for a while. Then he approached the old man to show him the part of the factory inside the warehouse, and they needed to go 10 meters further down. There were no more issues for the hero. Everything would be done at that exact moment, and so it was. He didn't hesitate, and the situation became very convenient for him. Gao Qiaobei really was a good guy. He nailed it, but his habit of screaming after teleporting remained the same. As soon as he managed to shut the old man's mouth, he did it. To avoid unnecessary noise, he covered his mouth with a finger and asked for total silence, no sound at all. He himself realized they were in enemy territory and immediately went quiet, as if they were in a cemetery. Observing the situation from the outside, Zhu understood that they had arrived at just the right time. The bandits had not yet reached the place. Only one thing tormented the old man, as if he had come across the strongest zombie. And the problem was that there was no gunpowder there. There were cannons, which was even better. Quite a while. Maybe something had happened. Then the same light began to appear near him, just like in Gao Qiaobei's teleports. After all, our heroes had returned with a major loot and decided to show what they had brought. The brother looked with great interest at the bottom of the boxes, which should have been overflowing with weapons. Not just weapons, the boys said, but also medicine, resources, and gunpowder-based armaments. No wonder those bandits fought so hard for such a treasure. Immediately after the first contact, Zhu suggested they empty the whole warehouse before someone noticed them. Ming was tired of standing still and said he would go with them, and that wasn't up for debate. The scared man didn't disagree for a second, instantly agreeing with the plan. At that moment, the enemy was already almost upon them. No one there would hesitate, not even the enemy. Some creatures began to destroy the monsters one by one. Their heads were scattered across the ground and the wall. These were the same ability users who had attacked the brothers in the forest. After killing one monster, even more second-level zombies began to run toward the noise, at least at first. They didn't stand a chance against ability users that strong. The fat man swallowed hard as his comrades were nearly devoured by some creature, but didn't move. Still, he noticed there were many zombies, and all were second level. it wasn't so easy with them. Someone crushed a creature's head and said this was actually better. That way, killing the monsters was much better than capturing them one by one and wasting too much time. The two were a bit disappointed that they had never encountered a third level one. The fat man even wanted to tame one, but the old man was sure that if such a monster found them, only one outcome awaited them, and what awaited was fatal. The strange old man said only death awaited them. That horrified the men. They didn't even dare to think that such a specialist didn't believe in their strength. Then suddenly, a massive explosion rumbled through the entire warehouse, alerting everyone. How terrifying. One of the men was bitten by a zombie. He was so scared that he was bleeding all over his body. He begged for help with all his strength and used up almost all his energy screaming for him. The brother decided not to abandon his comrade in his time of need and said he would definitely help him. That madman decided to offer a second-level crystal core for absorption to test his luck. He smiled wickedly and said he could either become like them or die like hundreds of others. But apparently his mind was going. There was no life in him, and he didn't expect an answer. Apparently, it was all over for him. He couldn't understand why this guy was afraid. Why wasn't he eating the crystal? You could become the chosen one, God's chosen one. Become like God, ascend to the heavens. Why won't you eat it? The madman asked. Just before he had time to adjust his nearly dead comrade to his way, a bullet passed right in front of his temple. That bullet was completely aimed at that guy. Someone had decided not to give him a second chance to escape. That guy fired the shot to put an end to the horror that this ball-wielding mutant had created. The man was not at all happy with those words. He demanded that the words that adventurer had said be repeated. He pointed the gun and asked if he really wanted to hear those words again. Then he said, "Then listen, get out of here, you mutant." The man was furious. It was clear he was ready to kill him, and he said so directly. The old man ordered them to stop. What? Was he really allowing a soldier to humiliate his comrades? And the reason was obvious. Cooperation was important for everyone there. No one would work for free. In the end, he asked the blonde man if he knew what the most important trait for a leader was. And the point was, you could always cut off the branches that didn't grow the way the leader needed, clearly implying something. The old man approached the staff member and asked him to give orders to his men so they could follow the gunshots. The smell of sulfur was already in the air. The commander didn't waver at all. Amid that strange chill, he treated the old man better than anyone. Then came the orders for the soldiers to grab knives and only shoot when commanded. Enough time had already passed for the warehouse to be emptied of most of its supplies. Zhao was clearly happy they had managed to grab all that, and added that with it, they could arm the whole family to the teeth. Ning was deeply hurt that they had taken so much so easily and smoothly, but that wouldn't keep them behind for long. He touched Gao Caobei and asked if he was alright with it, if they could keep moving. Everything was okay, but it was a bit exhausting to carry so much all at once, so he was out of energy. Ning asked if there was any chance for a break or to catch his breath. Unfortunately, they had very little time. The zombies wouldn't hold those people back for long, so they needed to hurry. Later, he added that they still needed to bring back a few more medicines. This would be the last call. However, he decided to gather his strength to collect all the treasures from that place. In that case, they vanished with a certain heaviness. There was no expression on Gao Qiaobei's face. Was everything really going so well? Everyone was confident, but the scared old man could barely stand. His head hung as if he were about to faint. Farther ahead, the brothers weren't paying attention to their comrade's condition, as they discussed how to carry the remaining supplies and then burn the warehouse to hell. Gao Qiaobei was finding it hard to stay on his feet, but that wasn't it. Everything was leading to one conclusion. His powers weren't infinite, and he, of course, collapsed with a roar. The men heard the crash behind them, their last key to salvation lying before their eyes. Ning realized the old man had collapsed from exhaustion. He had no strength left, so they had gotten greedy. They realized their partner still couldn't use his abilities that often, but for now, they needed to take him to a safe place. The main danger was approaching them. At the entrance, the silhouettes of a crowd of people could be seen. Up front came the trio considered the most dangerous among all the soldiers. On the other hand, our guys were hiding behind some crates. A blonde man said that the place had plenty of stuff, enough supplies to last a month. However, before they could continue the conversation, the old man's head was shot. Before he could react, the blonde man was also captured along with his other comrade and thrown to the ground. The scared one immediately mocked them, saying he wouldn't simply hand over the supplies. Despite that, if the blonde man wanted them, he'd need to have power, clearly mocking him. However, the blonde man laughed, which left the scared one confused. Suddenly, the man he had shot earlier had regenerated right behind him. Even after shooting him again, it had no effect. Frightened, he ordered everyone to open fire on him. But before that could happen, a man with red eyes put an end to them. "Leave now. I hope they weaken each other, and then I'll have a chance to take them." The scared man was begging for his life. He even said he had strong allies on his side, but the old man said his allies were dead now. He explained that when they arrived at the fishing points, his assassins were already hidden, and he declared that, just like the other side, they never intended to cooperate from the beginning. Then he prepared an attack and struck him in the head, declaring that his era had come to an end. After that, the man ordered his comrade to go capture the others who were outside, and so the other man went after them. The blonde man asked how they were going to move all that by themselves. The old man pointed out that they didn't need to rush things, because they needed to clear out the rats first. That old man wasn't stupid. He noticed that the ground outside was wet and clung easily to shoes. Realizing from that there were people nearby, Joe and Zhou Ming quickly left their hiding spot and charged at them. However, the blonde man began preparing his attack. Before the attack could reach Zhou, he managed to deflect it. So Joe smiled as his plan had worked. Zhou Ming then appeared behind the blonde man. The blonde man was soon lying on the ground due to the impact. Zhao asked Zhou Ming to lower his guard, because there was still someone even more formidable than that one. So the two advanced toward the old man. However, after attacking, they realized his skin was as hard as iron. Zhou quickly shouted to his brother, telling him to fight. The two attacked the old man simultaneously with their powers, but the old man emerged unscathed even after all of that. They soon realized that the old man was absorbing their power. The old man said it was an incredible ability and proposed that the two join him. He explained that if they joined his group, they would receive a good amount of supplies, but Zhou didn't seem to believe the words of that man. Still, the old man explained that they were different from the rest of the world, declaring that they were superhumans and destined to be the rulers of the new world. Zhao asked about the ordinary people. The old man said, "They will be the cornerstone of the new world under our protection." However, the protagonist realized that in reality, this meant slavery. Upon hearing that, the old man asked if he had seen the new world, to which Zhou replied that he didn't need to see it and said, "Just thinking of a rabble made up of people like you is disgustingly revolting." Zhou Ming grabbed the blonde man and told them to leave. The protagonist started to go, but before leaving said he would find each of them individually and told that so-called new world to go to hell. And so the entire place exploded due to the gunpowder. Elsewhere, Zhu Ying tried calling her brother, but without success. Zhou Ying noticed there had been an explosion and then used her powers to see. And from there, she saw a hand grabbing onto the door. Upon seeing that, Zhu Ying turned pale, and her mother asked what had happened. She replied that a third-level zombie had just moved. The zombie was awake and coming out through the door. Zhou Ming asked if Zhou was okay and wondered about Takahashi. However, Takahashi was lying nearby, asleep. Zhao said it was better for them to leave, but Zhou Ming asked why Zhu knew so much about the superhumans, to which he replied that they were just people like Lin Ji and deserved to be eliminated. Suddenly, something emerged from the ground. It was the old man in a new form. Elsewhere, Zhu Ying was desperately trying to call them, trying to warn about a third-level zombie that had awakened. Her mother asked her not to panic after all. They could easily leave if anything happened. She also said that her father used to handle explosives in the mine, and she always worried about him. But worrying wouldn't help much, so sometimes they had to take practical action, to trust in themselves, the women. In another moment, the monster attacked our hero. He was pushed back, but his brother caught him by the arm. His brother asked how that old man had survived and become stronger. Zhao realized that this was the power of a supercell. The monster was soon surprised to learn that Zhu knew about his ability. He explained that his cells had a defense mechanism. When his body was threatened, his cells would grow stronger according to the level of the threat. As soon as he gained his ability, it reached the second level and his cells became capable of absorbing threats and converting them, like that. The monster quickly charged toward them. The two dodged and launched a joint attack on the man's back, but it was unsuccessful, and in the blink of an eye, Zhou Ming was thrown far away. Although Zhao was worried about his brother, he charged toward the monster. Their punches collided and the monster said, "My cells also get stronger from this." And that would continue as long as his cells remained active. Elsewhere, Zhu Ying and her aunt were in a different location. They saw the bodies of some people lying on the ground, and she asked if that was the work of Zhu. Suddenly, they heard a gunshot, and her aunt told her to be careful. A man with a gun walked by, counting up to 6. Then he fired near them. He quickly realized there were 2 people and ordered them to come with their hands up. Her aunt told her to leave everything to her. They then approached the man, and he asked if they knew anything about those 2 other men. However, he noticed that the 2 women were quite beautiful, and said he wanted to get a feel. Suddenly, the aunt called out for Zhu as if he were nearby. But that was her plan, to get closer to him and try something. She managed to knock the gun out of the man's hand. He found it all interesting and said he'd follow her and have some fun for himself. Somewhere else, Zhao was being pressed against a wall. The monster said Zhao was different from anyone he had met. After all, he knew about his powers, could use 2 abilities at once, and also knew something about the new world. He then declared that he would make him tell everything he knew. But Zhou noticed a cold air, and then he smiled. Zhou began provoking the man, saying things that were sure to irritate him. The monster grabbed Zhao's neck more forcefully and threw him to the ground. The monster ordered him to shut up, saying he wouldn't believe a word he said. But Zhou replied, "If there really were gods in this world, you'd be nothing more than an abandoned child." Furious, the monster prepared another attack, but Zhou dodged just in time, and in the background, a silhouette appeared. The monster noticed his hands were frozen. An arm then emerged from the ground and grabbed his leg. The zombie muttered that he needed fire because it was cold. The protagonist seized the opportunity and grabbed his brother to flee. Meanwhile, Zhu Ying's aunt was fighting. She managed to knock the man far away. The man was lying on the ground, barely able to speak, and said he was a martial arts trainer. She mocked him, saying that to her, He seemed more like a sparing partner. Irritated, the man said he would kill her. The woman quickly asked Zhou Ying to grab the iron bar. Before the man could shoot her, she managed to land a solid hit on him. After that, the woman told the girl to stay on that side. Suddenly, she tried to attack her. However, her aunt managed to regain control. She commanded the man to get out of her body. The monster didn't understand why she was still conscious. She then said, "The taste of your soul is as filthy as the undead." Suddenly, the man began to be burned by some kind of blue flame. Elsewhere, Joe was face to face with the monster once more. The monster said he wouldn't escape so easily. He declared that all of them would die right there. Suddenly, a hand pierced through his body and destroyed him with ice. The zombie kept repeating that it was cold. Without wasting time, Joe rushed at him. He tried to strike, but without success. His blade had been frozen. His hand was also frozen. Joe could barely lift the knife. The zombie froze his scar and lunged at Joe. But suddenly, the monster was struck by something. It was the mother who had arrived with his sister. Finally, the three of them were together. His mother asked about Zhao's arm. He told her not to worry and explained that his older brother was even more injured. She asked if it was because of the monster, and he said yes. She then went toward the monster, prepared an attack, and struck the zombie, unleashing a massive beam of power through its back. However, even after all that, the zombie was still alive. Zhao appeared behind it and drove a spear into the zombie's body, and finally killed it. It was finally over. His mother then said, "Let's get your brother and find the others." However, Zhu Ying noticed something. The zombie wasn't dead yet. A huge mass of ice appeared behind it. The mother attacked, and her son followed right after. But Zhou realized he couldn't inflict any damage on it, so he'd have to finish it with a single strike. But he didn't have the strength for that at the moment. Meanwhile, the zombie leaned on the ice, and Zhu noticed the stone. Elsewhere, the woman was fighting the zombie. Realizing he was getting stronger and stronger, she then told him to retreat and said she would hold him back. Zhou Ying realized her abilities weren't good for direct combat. However, they couldn't cause more chaos. First, they had to get Zhou Shu out of there. The mother remained deep in thought when suddenly she was struck by an attack from the zombie. She was thrown against the wall and coughed up blood. However, Zhou appeared and placed his hand on the zombie's head, activating his ability, Blood Butcher, which was now fully evolved. He launched the monster far away with his ability. The zombie tried to counterattack, but Zhou, wielding his sword, unleashed a strike that brought the zombie to an end. Looking up at the sky, he said, "Let's go home."
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.